tonight. So first item, Common Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. First item is the approval of minutes of May the 4th, 2020.
So moved.
Thank you. I had a mover from Councillor McKenzie, seconded by the deputy. Thank you. And on the question, I'll call all those in favor. Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone. Thank you. Motion is carried. Next item.
Next item, Your Worship, is approval of agenda, and there are a few additions. The first addition would be 16.1. It's a secondment agreement with respect to development scale. 16.2 would be fundee key option to lease agreement, and 16.3 would be a non-disclosure agreement with respect to TD Station.
I'll move the agenda as amended.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded by Councillor Merrithew. Sorry, I was just writing. Common Clerk, just to repeat, 16.2.
And my apology, those should be 17s. They're coming from Committee of the Whole. So 17.1 is the secondment agreement for developed SJ. 17.2 is fundee key option to lease agreement. And 17.3 is TD Station non-disclosure agreement.
Okay, thank you. And as you're okay to amend that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Merrithew, you're fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Thank you. The motion's carried. Next item.
Next item is the disclosure of conflict of interest, if there are any.
Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any. Thank you. Next item.
Number 5, Your Worship, is the consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda 5.1 to 5.8 inclusive.
Thank you. Moved and seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. Okay, no, you're fine. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I've been able to read body language and expressions, so thank you. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Yeah, Councillor Reardon, go ahead. And I see you, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Reardon, you're up.
Okay, Mike, I just have a 5.2 there. I want to briefly mention that is the agreement that the city's going to be looking at with Enbridge. We're going to extend the date so that they continue those talks. And that in the report it says that these terms regarding the installation, operation, and maintenance obligations respecting their natural gas distribution infrastructure within the bounds of the city. So that was begun in 1999, and I believe, are probably the only municipality in New Brunswick that said to them, you guys go ahead and put your infrastructure anywhere you like. So it's on the facade of buildings. So it's so if I had my electrical mast on the front of my building, if I had my propane tanks on the front of my building, like I had the gas on the front of my building, it would look terrible out there. So I want to see that as we go forward amended. That utility infrastructure should not be on the front. I have a big, huge gray connector out front. I said to them, if you're putting it on out front, you have to put a shrub in front of it for me. They refuse to put it in the back. They refuse to put a shrub out there for me. I have a big red connector. It's not even heritage red, the connector on it. But if I want to paint my door, I have to get a permit from the city, and I have to choose one of those colors. So I don't agree with that at all. So that's my only beef with that. I know that's being extended. They're talking about that infrastructure now. They've torn up your streets down the middle. They said they would patch them. It destroys the integrity of your streets. They're never the same again. So I'd like to see some of that addressed, and that's it for me for the consent agenda.
Thank you. City Manager, can the appropriate staff person we've raised this item. I just want to be clear with the public as to what is in the consent agenda for tonight, just so that folks are clear what's being dealt with, please.
We have Deputy Commissioner Jeff Hussey, who's the acting commissioner, and Bob Crawford on the line. Jeff, you want to start us off, please?
Good evening, Council, Your Worship. This is an agreement between the 3 municipalities and Enbridge Gas, which isn't Enbridge Gas anymore. Sorry, it's eluding me here. But anyways, they are they are working to go through and renew the agreement for another 25 years. And I do have Barb Crawford on the line here, and she was the lead on this project. So I'm going to let her give you some of the finer details of this. Barb?
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor, Councillor Reardon, we're actually looking at that very closely, especially in the heritage areas. And because it was such a long agreement before, we're clearly taking a lot of that into discussions, and that's why we've come back to council again to extend it. We're working with Fredericton and Moncton because we all have the same concerns.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. 25-year agreement. Don't like that. You know, we've got too many of those on the go, and they're hard to tweak halfway through. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And city manager?
Yeah, your worship, to you and members of council, but for your question about informing the general public what this is all about, this is simply a request to extend the current agreement for another period of time while we work through the negotiations for and details of a follow-on agreement. And that's where, as Ms. Barb Crawford mentioned, we will take into account the comments of Councillor Reardon and many other things that we have learned over the past 25 years that we would like to see modified moving forward.
Okay, thank you, city manager. And I've lost track, but I thought somebody, Councillor McKenzie, did you have a question?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you.
Come to you, Councillor. Yep, thank you.
5.7. I'm really concerned about the construction season for St. John. We've got a number of projects. Now, this says Monday, July the 6th, 6:30 for public hearings. Is that supposed to be June 6th, not July?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hopefully it is.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Your worship, through you to Councillor McKenzie, no, this is correct. It would go to the Planning Advisory Committee at its June meeting, which is the next available meeting, and then on to Council for public hearing for July 6th. And this application just came in the door last week, so staff have been very proactive in arranging a meeting just this past week with the proponent to ensure it goes seamlessly through the process and fast track it to the best of our abilities. We've also advised of options that will enable the application to parallel process a number of building permit processes to position them for moving forward very quickly in the construction season. So they are well positioned. I would, I guess, advise council as well that there are legislative timelines that we are working with in terms of public notice that keep us to this schedule, but we will work to the best of our abilities to enable this to move forward very quickly.
Okay, Jacqueline, so that July 6th is a regularly scheduled council meeting, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, could we, in an effort to try to move things along for these projects, not have a special meeting right after the PAC meeting to get them underway?
I mean, there could be an option of doing that. It would make it very challenging because the only council date would be a matter of days after the PAC meeting. So it does make it very challenging for staff to veer off of the regular schedule in this instance.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's challenging sometimes for these construction companies too. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have to say Jeff Hussey's got the beat on the COVID beard here, but just to the same point at 5.7, I've had a lot of comments about the changes that will be proposed on Paradise Row. So I just wanted to alert the public that the public hearing date for that site is changing to August the 4th. Again, August the 4th will be the public hearing date on that one. I've gotten quite a few comments from residents on that one, so I wanted to make sure it was clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I had anyone else on my list. Okay, thank you. On the consent agenda, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone. Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
Item 6, Your Worship, members' comments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan, kick us off. I see you, Deputy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Luckily, with the provincial changes and the work we have done to continue to behave ourselves and being rewarded with flattening the curve, our Cherrybrook Zoo is open this week every day between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Admission is by donation, so it is an opportunity. It is the last opportunity to go see the animals that you've loved for so many years. So check out their Facebook site for details, but that's every day this week between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So you still have an opportunity to support your Cherrybrook Zoo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, I said, because that's what I believed at that time, that we didn't have any funding coming from Heritage Canada for the Canada Day celebrations, but we do have the funding now. It has come through from Heritage Canada, so we're very thankful for that. So we're putting together, as of this moment, the only thing we've made a decision on is that we are having fireworks over the St. John Harbor on Canada Day. And of course, that will be open to everyone. They'll be starting at dusk, and it'll be up to everybody to stay there 6 feet apart. So that will be part of our celebration. I'm not sure what else will take place because we have to determine that we have events, of course, that we follow the rules and all the restrictions. So I will announce that because the only way we're probably going to have it announced really is through council and word of mouth. So we want everyone to come to the fireworks at least, and then maybe a couple of weeks from now we'll know if we're having something else. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to, I received a little piece of information from Kate Wilcott, the Arts and Culture Coordinator. I'm just going to read this in regards to Loyalist Day, which was May 18th. So this spring, the United Empire Loyalist Association received a community arts grant to recognize the 235th anniversary of St. John's Charter and to celebrate the 237th anniversary of the arrival of the Loyalists. Traditionally, Loyalist Day has been marked with civic gatherings, cake, musical performances, and many other community-based events. But many of these had to be canceled in 2020. The United Empire Loyalist Association used their funds this year in an innovative and generous way to commission a poem as a gift to the City of St. John. Working with city staff and the Community Arts Board, the association commissioned Shannon Webb Campbell, a mixed Indigenous settler poet, writer, and critic, based in St. John, to create a piece that would celebrate the people who have called St. John home. The poem is titled Menzagoic Redux, which means return to the windy place, and can be found on the city's website. Staff also brought forth initiative to engage citizens over the long weekend through a Facebook event, invitation to host a Victorian tea party, share photos of their families preparing foods made with St. John products, take a historic walking tour, and listen to their favorite St. John musicians. And a few stats here. They distributed the news release to 67 emails on our local media list, a combination of newsrooms and individual reporters, distributed news release on Facebook to over 15,000 followers. It had over 220 page views with 85 people clicking through our website, distributed through our e-notification to 6,500 subscribers. Approximately 500 subscribers clicked through to read the release with the poem, and distributed news release on Twitter to 15,000 followers. So much thanks to Kate Wilcott and her team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to thank all the citizen correspondence that we get. We might not talk about them as much as people would like, but we do read them and you know, certainly think about them. So I like to just give a shout out to all the correspondence. just in case I don't get another chance. And just a thank you to staff, all the staff reports that they do, all the hard work. You know, they don't get a lot of recognition. It's mostly, you know, the politicians that, you know, get a lot of the good and bad stuff. So, you know, just shout out to them for giving us, you know, the information that we need to make an educated and informed decision. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to bring light to the fact that June is Stroke Month as we enter June, and as I am a diehard supporter of the Heart and Stroke Foundation, I just wanted to bring note to that, and as well to inform folks and remind folks of the signs and symptoms of stroke. The best way to remember that is through the acronym FAST. So F stands for face, whether one side's drooping. A stands for arms. Can you hold one up longer than the other? S stands for speech, whether it's mumbled or not. And T stands for time, and that's the importance of calling 911. More and more what we're seeing is that folks aren't recognizing the symptoms, but not necessarily recognizing the urgency in a stroke. And the reality is that every second matters in terms of both the recovery and survival rate of a patient, and especially now as we deal with COVID-19 and folks, particular people's apprehension of going to emergency rooms into the hospital. I just want to make sure that people understand that there's significant urgency in calling 911 and to continue to do so while we are in this pandemic. So that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Hickey. That reminiscent of Jump Rope for Heart, that a lot of us have missed out on those school assemblies, but that acronym certainly resonates with me, and being in a number of those school assemblies. And thanks to the councillor that's mentioned this evening, all the public correspondence that we get. Councillor Casey, you're right in saying that. Certainly not all mentioned, but certainly all well thought of in terms of preparation for evening debate and committee meetings. A couple quick things. Thank you to all that attended the Dominion Park beach cleanup. It was another success, and notable community partners, JTR Services, Timbertop Adventures, GoFundMe events, Inside Out Nature Center, and the donations of certainly time and resources to assist in that cleanup, and especially to our City of St. John, Greg Cutler from Leisure Services, that has been a big part of that as well. And I know he was there and helping support the efforts, not just handing out, but going around and certainly picking up debris as well. So that's greatly appreciated, and we thank the community for coming together and taking care of that very important asset. Also, thank you to Michelle Paul Ellis. Those of you that know her, and I know our engineers on the line this evening would know her. She works for one of the Irving group of companies, but has takes care of L'Arche Memorial Park every season, planting perennials and annuals in some of the street signage, and her efforts to beautify that park and take care of it are always appreciated. And if you know her, certainly say thanks. But I know that park looks good because of our city efforts, but also because of neighbors and citizens like Michelle. So Michelle, I know that you have more important things to do this evening, and perhaps tune into this with the busy kids in your house. But thank you for my house tools. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Did I miss anyone else? Okay, thanks. Just a couple of quick comments from myself. First of all, I just wanted to say on behalf of Common Council in the City of St. John, I wanted to express our Heartfelt sympathy to the family and friends of Captain Jennifer Casey. Our armed forces do so much to protect our country. And at the time of hearing of the passing of Captain Casey and the Snowbirds team, we're working on to lift the spirits of our country. I know that so many in our community, myself included, truly enjoyed the Snowbirds flyover for Operation Inspiration, in St. John. Thank you to Captain Casey. An entire nation is grateful for your service. As well, I'd like to wish a speedy recovery to Captain Richard McDougall, who is from Dieppe. And we did see Captain McDougall in the news yesterday, as well as a very fitting tribute to Captain Casey as she makes her final journey back to Halifax. Secondly, and I think it was Councillor Sullivan mentioned that we're now in the yellow phase, so we really do have to stay diligent as we protect one another from COVID-19. We know we saw news certainly from other big cities. We saw lots of folks out and about on the weekend. The weather is getting better, so our health is not our only concern as the weeks go by. We need to follow the directives, keep our distance, and make sure that we're doing our part. Also, our small businesses and other businesses are beginning to open up at different paces, but all of them need our business and need our support. So our local charities as well are adapting to new ways of fundraising as their work continues despite the lack of events. So I understand that many are no longer or may not be able to support, but I would encourage those that can to continue to support our local businesses and charities, and keep an eye, if you're on social media, to these very innovative concerts and other events. I saw the St. John Theatre Company, for example, had an online fundraiser on the weekend and was quite successful. So I know we'll continue to support those businesses. We'll do it safely, and we'll all follow the directives of our Chief Medical Officer. And I would ask again for your patience as we continue to get back up ourselves as a city and open up our parks and do so safely. So with that, thank you very much. And Common Clerk will ask for the next item, please.
Your Worship, the next item on the agenda is under public hearings, and it's 9.1, and it's with respect to a proposed street closing on Fairville Boulevard. And I just asked that we could take one moment while I call one of these speakers that's registered.
Okay, thank you. And my clock says 6:29, so
Well, that will work out perfectly then.
you can do that, and you let us know. Yep. So we'll pause for a moment, or
it should only take about 10 seconds.
okay. So perhaps while you're doing that, I'll just share council and members of the public. So of course, this is unprecedented times. Council's not met in person for some time. To my knowledge, we've not had a public hearing in this mechanism in the past. So I just want to explain to the public that we have advertised the public hearing tonight, that we only heard from one proponent who wished to speak during the public hearing. But just so the public knows, we did advertise, we did make that opportunity available for folks to speak, and that we only heard from one person tonight who we are attempting to get on the line. So
they are on the line now, Your Worship.
okay.
And I get Commissioner Fogan will be introducing the item.
Okay, just for a point of clarity, I'm sorry, Common Clerk again, first time we've held a public hearing. We've only had one person register to speak. I understand they wish to speak in favor of the item. Typically, I would call 3 times for folks to speak in opposition. Would it be your advice to me tonight, Common Clerk, that we would just move past that portion of the public hearing after we've heard from Mr. Fogan?
That's correct. So once Mr. Fogan gives a brief overview, we will ask the speaker, Mr. Ben Cressman, to provide his views. And it's not necessary after that to request whether others wish to speak, because we've advertised this and asked citizens to register.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that explanation. And Mr. Fogan, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Council, just a brief introduction to this. If Council would recall, previous to this Council, back in 2010, there was a land swap proposed with the owners of the Lancaster Mall property, which facilitated the city constructing a street. And the city received its portion of those properties. And then in March of this year, the city completed that deal with the current owners of the Lancaster Mall. And now they're looking to close up a portion of what was a street in order to bring those properties together to do a development. And with that, that's just a brief introduction, but I do have Curtis Langell on the line in case there are detailed questions. And also Mr. Cressman is here to speak in favor.
Okay, great. So in this stage of the process, we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Cressman, and we're interested to hear what you have to say, sir.
Sure. Thank you, and good evening to everybody. Want to thank you for taking the time to have this public hearing and to host it in a new format for the first time. It was pretty exciting to have this and have Curtis help facilitate that as well. So I just wanted to make myself available. If there was any questions or community concerns, you explained that I'm the only one speaking tonight, but if council had any concerns about what our intent is, about our future development, things like that. And then generally just express our excitement to have this land assembly finally formed and hopefully finally get this parcel developed. I know it's sat vacant for a number of years and there's been multiple proposals put forward to the community and businesses to do development here, but we feel we're finally in the position to make something happen, time permitting with COVID, but we're excited to hopefully develop here in 2020, and we're in for permit. And lastly, just like to express my thanks to Curtis and the real estate department for their professional service through this process. So I'll leave it to councilors, whomever else that might have some questions. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cressman. Deputy Mayor, did you have a question, comment?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Cressman, you sound very excited about your good news. I wondered if you wanted to share with us and the public any of the details of your new development.
Sure, I can share a few things. Not everything's been finalized. I'm sure people can appreciate that, but as was noted in the opening, Strathallan Capital, whom I'm an employee of, we are the owners of Lancaster Mall, and this parcel of land, which we've referred to as the Harding Strip. I don't know if that name's going to stick or not, but anyways, our plan is to do some more commercial development there, retail focused, which hopefully will complement the neighborhood and bring some new services into the neighborhood that aren't there currently. And we really hope that it's a springboard, if you will, and will help gain some momentum for our ultimate project, which is Lancaster Mall, which, as everyone knows, needs some TLC and some attention. So we're hoping that this project's well received, and we're hoping that the community and the neighborhood can make use of it and will enjoy it, and that will then trickle over into Lancaster, and we'll see the benefits there as well too.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cressman. I wish you all the best, and sure everybody on the west side will look forward to the new development.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Cressman, it sounds like that was it in terms of comments or questions. Thank you for taking time to be with us tonight.
I'll move
Thank
first.
you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Move first reading.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Moved by the Deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Any comments, questions? So we have some staff available if need be. Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question then. All those in favor?
Right.
Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Sorry, Councillor Reardon, were you voting in favor or against? Can you just come off mute? I just want to make sure I catch your vote appropriately.
I'm in favor, but I'm on a bit of a delay, I think.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
I'm believing that's the case, so that's why I just asked. But okay, thank you. That was unanimous vote.
Okay, Your Worship, I just have to do the first reading. A bylaw respecting the closing of roads and streets or highways in the city of St. John.
I'll move second reading.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Deputy Mayor again, seconded by Councillor Merrithew. Thank you. Okay, on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you. Councillor Reardon, the thumbs up is very clear, folks. Thumbs up, thumbs down works as well, so perfect. Okay, thank you.
A bylaw respecting the closing of roads and streets or highways in the city of St. John.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Councillor Reardon, I don't know how you can be on a delay. I can see your apartment from here, your house from here, so perfect, thank you. Thank you to staff. Those public hearings, I know they take, again, a tremendous amount of work. Mr. Langell, the Growth and Community Development team, and everyone else involved. Thank you very much. Okay, next item, please.
Next item is 11.1 on your agenda. It's a submission from Councillor Mackenzie with respect to illegal dumping of garbage.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, I know we've talked about this many times. I didn't put a motion in because we agreed to have no more motions for a while, but this comes out of pure frustration. We have many areas in the city that have illegal dumping. The one I'm going to talk about tonight is down on Dufferin Avenue behind Thistle St. Andrews. We have a house on Wellesley Avenue that has been on file with us for a couple of years, maybe 3 years. Staff's been working very hard on it. We've actually cleaned the property up twice and billed back to the owner. Now we have the residents of that building walking down behind the Red Cross building on Wellesley Avenue and dumping the garbage. The other day I went down there, I couldn't believe the mess that was there, and talked to the police. The police were frustrated. They went and spoke to it. There's been no additional garbage added. The garbage that was thrown there last week is still there. Our staff works very, very hard, and I appreciate everything they do. But I think it's time we had a different process. I think we need to lobby the provincial government for a change in legislation that allows us to fine people and to enforce it, to go so far as put a levy on a house. So I just want to have a discussion. I think it's really important that we look towards a new process because our people are working their hearts out and we're just not getting where we need to be.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Well, Your Worship, I'd just like to, maybe somebody from staff can kind of review the public where we are on this. I thought we had some mechanism in place where we could find people. I just want to know if we do for sure. Because, I mean, illegal dumping happens many places in the city, and many times we clean it up and then we charge it back to the province.
Ms. Hamilton, I'm not sure if Ms. Poffenroth is on the line. Could you give us just a sort of a general overview of what we are doing and what authorities we have, Ms. Hamilton?
Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor, we do have an unsightly premises program that we do have a legislative authority to address, and I do see Ms. Poffenroth on the line, so she's likely better equipped to provide more specifics on the parameters of that program and how it might relate to this particular case.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Poffenroth?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Councillor Mackenzie. So there's a couple bylaws here that could be at play. The unsightly premise bylaw, which we have used before with this particular property. And there's also the solid waste bylaw. And that may apply, and it depends where they're dumping the garbage. And so we would, have to look at where they're dumping the garbage to determine which bylaw is the most appropriate. I understand that there may be a project underway at some point about being able to issue tickets under the solid waste bylaw, but We would have to do some digging on that with transportation environment to understand where that project is right now. And then, of course, as you're aware, the unsightly premise bylaw has lots of teeth around cleanup, fining, ticketing, and things like that. So it depends which bylaw it falls into. And we could provide more information specifically about this property.
Well, I guess my frustration is that, we have the processes in place and we have the people working on it, but it just takes so long to get things done. Like the conversation that I had with the police the other night was they said, this is part of a much bigger problem. The police are watching that building for illegal activity. And, it just seems like the neighborhood has had to put up with it for 2 or 3 years now, and the garbage is blowing all over the place. And even though we have bylaws in place and we can enforce fines, the process to make things happen is really, it takes too much time. and it's just frustrating, and it's frustrating for the taxpayers that live down there.
Councillor McKenzie, I guess I'm glad to have, and I know Councillor Reardon wants to jump in, glad to have some discussion on this item. It's an important item. We, with staff's support, of course, we've worked hard on dilapidated buildings and so on. My gut is saying, but I wanted to have some discussion. Could we refer this to the city manager if folks are okay with that action, and try to come back, a bit of a review and a report back to council here, because I think this is a conversation that, you've had, many other council members have had, citizens are frustrated with, but just trying to wrap my head around, Councillor, what's that appropriate step? Have the city manager with Ms. Poffenroth and others go review, see where the gaps are, come back to us perhaps with some options, maybe to use your word, more teeth, to see what we could do. But I know a referral ends discussion. So can I go to Councillor Reardon and then and Councillor Hickey, and we'll see what the Councillor Reardon, can I send it to you? And
thank you, Your Worship. I would be happy with doing that. I mean, I'm looking for an easy way to facilitate this. So I'd like to have a fine. I'd like to have a big one. I'd like to put out a warning to the owner of the property, say you have to clean up your property. If that owner says, well, I've got somebody else dumping on it, then we've got another issue that we've got to fix. But we need to move forward on this. We don't have the staff resources to keep going behind our citizens and cleaning up their properties for them and then sending it off to the province, that bill to be added to their property taxes or whatever they do with it. I want something that's easier. I want something that's faster. And I'd like something that has a bit of a sting for it in it so that people won't like it and will look after and clean up their own properties. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry, Councillor Hickey. City Manager, did you want to jump in? Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, thank you, Councillor Hickey. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and certainly echo both Councillor Reardon and Councillor McKenzie's points here. What I would add is a friendly amendment to, or perhaps a question to staff, whether or not it's even in our scope, but to include that, I know all of us deal with issues around unruly neighbors and just general neighborly conduct, whether that's illegal dumping or attitude otherwise. I wonder if included in that referral, if we could explore ways to better deal with that, and whether or not we actually have, I'm sure it's a question we already know, but whether or not we have legislative authority to add more teeth to that, I guess.
City Manager.
Your Worship, members of council, Councillor McKenzie's first point was absolutely correct. This council, some time ago, kind of came to an understanding that our number one priority was working through the sustainability challenges, and that was before COVID-19 even hit. And so this particular issue of people illegally dumping, which is different than having a dilapidated building or an unsightly premise, we have been aware of it for quite some time, but it has never made it to the top of the heap to be addressed because of our other priorities. I think it would be appropriate at this point to Now, I'm not saying our sustainability challenges are behind us, far from it, but we're on our way. The plan has been approved by council. We will soon, if not today, have some staff capacity that we can put towards this while still dealing with COVID-19, et cetera. So the notion of referring this to the city manager to see what else we can possibly do to deal with illegal dumping in the city, certainly I believe would be appropriate at this point in time, so long as there's no expectation that we will come back at next council meeting with the brilliant and cutting ideas, but we can certainly start to introduce it onto the work plan. I think we need the focus to begin with illegal dumping. Issues of noise bylaws and everything else are an even more complex issue to deal with in terms of enforcement. But that would be a good first step to refer to the city manager to address illegal dumping.
Okay, thank you.
I would move referral then.
I'll second it.
Okay. Do I wrap this up now, Don?
Well, sorry.
Your ability to speak.
All I wanted to say was, after the discussion, I wanted to give everybody a chance too, but I wanted to refer it to staff to come up with some better ideas and try to, compare. I'd also like to get that cleaned up down there and have them build to 224 Wellesley Avenue if that's possible. It's been sitting there for a while.
Okay, thanks. I just we're walked a thin line there. We've got a referral motion on the table now. And I'd ask you, Councillor, you can maybe make a call to staff with those specifics. And okay, thank you. On the referral, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, Common Clerk, next item.
Your Worship, 12.1 on your agenda is a sustainability update from the city manager.
Okay, thank you. City manager.
Your Worship, members of council, as you are aware, this is a standing agenda item where we have committed at each council meeting to provide an update on sustainability. This week will be quite short because we are just on the heels of the approval of council of the entire sustainability plan. All I will mention for this evening is that work continues now on detailed implementation of that plan. And each one of the various ideas within the plan for, first of all, prong 2, or the initiatives to resolve the $10 million is ongoing. As needed, we will come back to council in order to seek any necessary changes to bylaws or final approvals or the like. We understand that there is a desire to be moving forward on this, and more importantly, to be seen to be moving forward. The staff could not agree more. However, there are a couple things we need to do, such as, in some cases, additional stakeholder engagement, etc., before we will be ready to return to council. For the benefit of the public, I know council fully understands this. I wish to be clear on the $10 million of prong 2 in order to address the deficit. All of those initiatives, without exception, must be in place and monies being either saved or additional revenues being generated by the end of this year. If that proves to be unachievable for any of the sustainability ideas in prong 2, then we will be going to the standby initiatives that have also been approved by council. So it is not a question of if we will solve the $10 million. It is simply now a question of when, in the next 5 to 6 months, that those various measures will be put in place. As for prong 1 and prong 3, progress continues, and I don't wish to revisit everything that was discussed within the sustainability plan, but it's safe to say that as much as the staff is focused on dealing with the short-term $10 million deficit reduction that must occur, the staff is even more focused on the prong 1 and prong 3 initiatives, the transformational reforms, because those are the initiatives that assure the long-term sustainability of the city. One of the expressions within the very short video clip that is on our website, under our webpage that talks about everything to do with sustainability, suggests on the chalkboard that we are on our way. And I can't think of a better saying that expresses where we are in the process at this point. With the decisions made, we are on our way, and I am quite optimistic, in fact convinced, that prong 2 will happen in time to address the $10 million deficit of 2021, and prong 1 and 3 will continue to be our longer term effort. With that, that concludes the sustainability update for this evening, subject to any comments or questions council may have.
I'll move we receive and file.
You're on mute, Mayor.
I wondered why you were all leaning into your cameras. Okay, moved by the deputy for receive and file, and I saw Councillor Riordan, I think, wanted to speak. Do I have a seconder, please? I feel like I'm at an auction. Thank you. Councillor Hickey is the seconder. Councillor Riordan, I believe you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a couple of points. On page 4 of the deck, it says essential services, March 17th, desirable services was public transit.
Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor. Sorry to interrupt. We're going into that presentation next.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go with my operation. All right.
Okay, thank you. Well,
oh, sorry.
No worries. Okay, and I apologize for for leaning in there. Anybody else on this update? Okay, don't see any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. That's carried. Thank you. Next item, Common Clerk.
Item 12.2 on your agenda is a staff presentation, operational concept restoration of services.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And City Manager, we'll have you introduce, please.
Your Worship, members of council, this particular briefing item this evening will be presented by Ms. Stephanie Rackley-Roach, who is our Director of Corporate Performance and who also has been obviously taking a leading role in all of our sustainability challenges. I will just remind council that normally in the last few months, we have had a standing agenda item on COVID-19, where we are and where we're heading. This, in fact, for all intent and purpose, is that update. However, tonight we are going to focus on the services that we have already restored, what is left to be restored and when we anticipate it occurring, and probably more importantly, what we feel we cannot or should not restore for the remainder of 2020. On that final point, I would just highlight before the presentation begins that the reality is 2020 budget is nowhere near what it used to be. You will recall that at the last briefings we provided, we have approximately $5 million in lost revenue to the city, and therefore we have to make up approximately $5 million in costs. How we are going to do that has been briefed to Finance Committee, and they understand and are supportive of the approach. The bottom line is, for a lot of these services, we simply cannot afford to bring them back this year. It is not business as usual. The other bottom line for service restoration is, in some cases, it is simply not safe for us to bring them back. So those are the two main considerations that you will see exposed throughout the brief, whether or not it is affordable, and secondly, whether or not it is safe to do so. With that, I hand over to Ms. Stephanie Rackley-Roach.
Yeah, you're muted, Ms. Rackley-Roach.
Thank you. That happens a lot. Appreciate that. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. The service restoration concept will outline a phased approach as to when and how much service will be restored in the coming months in accordance with the direction and guidance provided by the province of New Brunswick as it relates to COVID-19. As background, there have been a number of milestone dates that have guided service delivery decisions throughout the pandemic. On March 17th, guided by the Chief Medical Officer of Health and Government Authorities, the city's leadership team started the implementation of an essential services model. Direction on safely delivering public services was further clarified on March 19th with the declaration of the provincial state of emergency and mandatory orders. In early April, the city established a service restoration process with guidance from a number of authorities in collaboration with other New Brunswick municipalities. Critical services that could be reinstated were identified. The process was developed to align with the mandatory order of April 14th. On April 24th, the province unveiled a recovery plan for New Brunswick. This plan provides the foundation for the proposed service restoration concept. The first level of screening for service delivery was ensuring that the city could satisfy all the direction and guidance provided through the mandatory orders, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and WorkSafe New Brunswick. High priority was placed on ensuring that our own workforce remained safe and that we address the health and safety of our community. With the financial impact of COVID-19, service delivery considered reducing expenses in a time of decreased revenues, improving our ability to recover revenue, and protecting our infrastructure assets to avoid costly repairs in the long term. Increasing the utilization of our workforce and supporting economic development activity in our community were also key considerations. Essential services are those daily services necessary to ensure public health and safety, as well as basic societal functioning. Identification of essential services considers messaging from health and other government authorities on what the city can control in terms of what can open and what must be closed in accordance with direction and guidelines provided. The essential services model implemented on March 17th included 4 categories of service. Public safety services focused on police and fire response. The St. John Emergency Management Organization was activated and the 911 Center remained operational. Other essential public services included drinking water and wastewater treatment services, emergency public works activities, emergency building inspection and permitting functions, and winter road clearing. Several desirable services were maintained, including public transit, solid waste management, and city market food vendors. Public communications and select support services were maintained to ensure essential services could operate efficiently and safely. Early in the city's response to the pandemic, the financial impact was evaluated to reflect the implementation of an essential services model from both a revenue and cost perspective related to safely delivering service. In order to mitigate the impact, a number of cost control measures were put in place. Due to the early decision to implement these cost control measures, the city is in a much better position financially than had we waited. The service restoration concept being recommended this evening will support continued efforts to balance the 2020 budget. In late March, a service restoration process was formalized to ensure that all public health and safety requirements outlined by government and medical authorities could be satisfied for any service that was being considered for reinstatement, either in full or in part. The key consideration was affordability. This involved questioning whether revenue could be increased or expenses be managed to balance the 2020 budget. All service areas have been active in restoring service, with 25 services having been reinstated since March 30th. This list does not include services restored by the city's commissions, of which there are a number. For the most part, service areas are fully operational. With a focus on workforce utilization as part of the service restoration process, all employees have been working over the last 2 weeks, either safely, on-site, or remotely. Our customers may experience delays in response time in some areas due to resourcing and safety precautions that ensure the city adheres to the direction and guidance of government and health authorities. Plans have been developed by service areas to phase in reinstatement of remaining service offerings. These plans align with the province's recovery plan unveiled on April 24th. The timeline for phasing service reinstatement has been defined as spring ending late June, summer ending late August, and fall ending late November. Some service restoration timelines have yet to be determined based on the requirements set out in the province's recovery plan. A range of dates has been provided to align with mandatory orders, consider weather impacts, and manage customer expectations. Growth and Community Development Services is planning the introduction of counter service by appointment only this spring. The team will monitor this approach and adjust depending on customer feedback. In-person inspections, the ability to issue occupancy permits, and refunds for deposits are expected to be restored by the end of the month as part of the date. This summer, the team proposes the reinstatement of the standards program, which is aimed at vulnerable populations living in substandard housing. 3 services will be reinstated in the fall, including in-person counter service for the one-stop development shop. The vacant and dangerous buildings program will be restored, targeting priority cases for public health and safety. A virtual process for the appeal board will still need to be developed. The community standards program, which tackles proactive cases of
Ms. Rackley Roach, sorry could you just try to elevate your volume a little bit? Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much. Okay.
Is that better?
That's better.
Yes.
Thank you.
The vacant and dangerous, the community standards program, which tackles proactive cases of unsightly and dilapidated properties, will also be restored. Timing for reinstatement of various stakeholder and public engagements will be postponed until gathering and physical distancing restrictions are further eased by the province. Transportation and environment services, more specifically parks and recreation, will also phase in a number of services. More immediate reinstatements related to sports and ball field maintenance and parks and city landscaping are aimed at protecting our infrastructure assets and cleanliness. In addition to the Horseshoe Pit, select playgrounds, skate parks, and courts will be open to the public. 4 trails in Rockwood Park have been converted to one-way traffic to promote physical distancing. As we move into the summer months and the weather improves, splash pads, dog parks, and beaches will be operational. During the summer, Pro Kids will continue fundraising and administration efforts with a plan to place children in recreational opportunities in the fall. The fall phase also includes arenas operations. St. John Water will reinstate 2 service offerings this spring: meter testing and replacement and water quality testing in the customer's home or property. From a governance perspective, the Common Clerk will focus on facilitating in-person council meetings. Timing for council meetings with public attendance will continue to be suspended until restrictions are further eased by the province and the city can accommodate the guidelines safely. Considering safety requirements set out in the mandatory order and the need to control cost, a number of services are being recommended for continued suspension throughout 2020. Rationale for suspension of parks and recreation services include passport to parks based on gathering and physical distancing direction from the province, green machine due to safety risks related to sharing equipment, playground program, given we do not have sufficient staff training to daycare standard to safely deliver this service. Recreation programming must consider safety requirements and is being suspended to control costs. However, staff are continuing to collaborate safely with our community partners, including our neighborhood associations and community centers, and city support to low contact organized sports and the annual planting program to reduce costs. The asphalt overlay program is being considered for suspension to balance the budget. The program is valued at $500,000, which is approximately 6% of the total asphalt budget. Asphalt overlay is considered a temporary fix completed in low traffic areas and on streets that already need full reconstruction. The city will still invest in preventive maintenance activities such as pothole patching, asphalt resurfacing, and planned reconstruction work. The solid waste management pilot program approved by council in 2019 will be postponed until early 2021 to save money and ensure the necessary stakeholder engagement and communication can be done safely. The city does not have decision-making authority as to the restoration of services delivered by regional facilities. The city will provide support to these facilities on their safe and effective and cost-effective reopening as requested and or appropriate. As decisions are made, recommendations and or communication will be brought forward. A number of initiatives presented to council in the 2020 work plan will be delayed as a result of cost mitigation measures and reprioritization of resources tied to service delivery. The completion of some of these initiatives will be delayed until the fourth quarter of 2020, with a number of them planned for 2021. Council's priority setting for the 2020-2024 term will be planned once the municipal election has been scheduled. It is recommended that Common Council approve the operational concept for service restoration. Upon approval, the service restoration process will be used to ensure that all service offerings noted in the presentation are reinstated in accordance with mandatory orders public health and safety guidelines in consideration of the budget. Staff will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You're on mute, Your Worship.
And while you're, again, just getting a little roster here, thank you. I've got Councillor Merrithew, Councillor Hickey, Councillor Casey, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor McKenzie, basically everyone again. Okay, thank you. Councillor Donna, Councillor Deputy Mayor. Okay, we'll start off. Okay, Councillor Merrithew, you can kick us off, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Stephanie. Just a couple of questions, please. And more, maybe some explanation. Services suspensions, okay? Recreation programming, city support for organized sports, in brackets, use of sports and ball fields, so on and so forth. So they're suspended thus far and not open, but it says in the blue mark on that same page, I'm talking about page 81 or 11 of the presentation. Community groups may take on any of these services as appropriate, as long as there's no cost to the city and satisfies safety requirements. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for me, Stephanie, where this might go into the summer months, please?
Your Worship, if you don't mind, I'll take that one because it's an overall concept.
Sure, City Manager. Thank you.
That applies across the board. So the bottom line is, as I mentioned in the introduction, there are two reasons why we're recommending suspensions. Either because we just can't afford it, we just can't balance the budget if we do it. That's one. And the second one is we may not have the skills and capability to do it safely. The note that you're referring to on that page is if we suspend a program because we can't afford it, then perhaps there is a volunteer group out there that may wish to take it on behalf of the city. If there is such a group, then we would be happy to enter into discussions with them to first of all make sure that it's appropriate, that it's safe, that it's viable, that it's all of that, and try to understand how they would go about helping the community by taking on a particular item. So, and of course, there are labor implications with that as well, and collective agreements we need to look at. So there's all sorts of things we would look at. I guess our message to the community this evening is just because the city cannot do it, or we do not believe we should do it, does not necessarily mean that it is dead. Again, if there's a group that can step up and do it safely and do it in accordance with our requirements, and it matches within our labor collective agreements, et cetera, then perhaps we can still get it done. That will probably apply more for things that we cannot afford to do, as opposed to things that we believe are fundamentally unsafe to do. Because if it's fundamentally unsafe for us to do it, then it would be a bit of a stretch to imagine an interest group or a volunteer group that could do it and satisfy the safety requirements that we cannot. But we are open to discussing all of those possibilities with any groups that wish to come forward.
So, City Manager, that's a good explanation. Thank you so much. If there is a group, a sports group, whatever, and they wanted to look into this, who would they contact, please?
Well, they can contact the help desk of the city, which is the first point of contact for all things, or specifically they could reach out to the Parks and Recreation Department, because I suspect most of the ideas would be centered around that department, but there may be others as well. So either the helpline of the city or the specific department that's involved in that.
Okay. And lastly, please, sir, the asphalt overlay program, it may or may not be suspended this year. Do we have any kind of timeline when we will actually be able to answer that question?
Well, the reason Stephanie mentioned it that way is because you have not approved it. Our recommendation this evening is to cancel the overlay program. We need that $500,000 elsewhere.
Very good. I just wanted to put that forward, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the same concerns as Councillor Merrithew, so thank you, City Manager, for the follow-up there. And I certainly appreciate the as part of the restoration of services, the consideration to the vulnerable folks in our community, specifically those living in low income with children who are exponentially impacted by COVID-19 and by our public closures, as they depend more on our services than others. I do have two specific questions just based on concerns from residents and from the community. Any further insight on, one, when dog parks will open, and two, the restoration of in-person or public council meetings? Any idea on more specification?
Dog parks is coming soon. There are still some health considerations in terms of gatherings, touching common surfaces such as the gate entering the dog parks, etc. And we simply have no capacity left to clean that. We're already tapped out in terms of our capacity, just keeping the parks. We have chosen, the playgrounds, we have chosen to keep open and cleaning them properly. But I think dog parks will be soon. As for your question about public attendance at council meetings, that one, there's still some work to be done. My concern at this point is I believe, creatively perhaps find a way to have some public attend within our temporary council chamber, but that's going to cost money in terms of refits and everything else. And that temporary council chamber is only forecasted to be used for about another 2.5 months. So we are doing the estimates to see what we can do and what it would cost, but I suspect that the costs will be prohibitive in terms of why don't we just wait another 2 months until we're into the proper council chambers where we can enable public attendance with some social distancing. So short answer is I don't know yet, but the deliberation on public, well, first of all, council meeting in person, but then public attending those council meetings will in part be based on Chief Medical Officer of Health rules and guidelines, but also on the affordability of doing the retrofit that is needed in a temporary council chamber that we will not use 2.5 months from now.
No, exactly. I certainly agree with that opinion and as well. Thank you very much. That's everything I had. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Casey?
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Matthew basically commented on it, but if we can get some organized sports going, that would be, I think that would really help the spirits of the public, especially during the summer months, getting the kids out and everything. So we can make that happen, possibly with some support from the community. That would be, I think that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Your Worship, of course, I think everybody got the emails on the ball field, so obviously I think most councillors want to keep them open. I appreciate and want to thank staff for thinking outside the box here, because you will have parents, I'm absolutely sure, step up to the plate to get these ball fields open so their children can play ball. So obviously I'm going to vote in favor. I will vote in favor of this, but with the recommendation, try to get these ball fields open because there's a ton of teams and a ton of children affected, as you can tell by the emails, I'm sure. And I've talked to Tim about this before on the senior level. To save the city money, let the parents or those qualified, and as the city manager pointed out, readily so, the safeties are the utmost concern here. But I think we could maybe afford a staff, maybe if they are going to do that plan, maybe a supervisor from the city could help out. Anyway, I just appreciate thinking outside the box to get this done. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'm on the same page. My concerns have been answered. A good example of community support happened in the South End to restore a wall park down there. So I think we have it within our citizens, do that. I'm just glad that the opportunity exists for them to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reardon. There you go.
But thank you, Your Worship. When I read through this, the essential services from March 17th, we have under desirable, which page 4 of the slide deck says public transit, but I thought in April that the council had moved that into an essential service for the city. So that would make more sense for us to do that. And the other thing is in page 8 of the slide deck. It says service delivery status as of May 25th, transit and parking are operational, but we are operational with limited, restricted. So it will be hard for us. We just got our July money advanced to us. We're going to come out with a report on transit. We'll assess all that in August, I guess. It's going to be hard for us to assess that if we still have this limited status. So we're not fully back to providing full service here. So it makes it complicated for us. We also have that vulnerable population on as part of the community that we're serving. So I was somewhat just surprised to see service delivery status, transit, and parking operational.
Can Councillor Reardon, can I jump onto your comment and just City Manager? I believe we were going to work with the province on the number of folks on the bus, that the number of passengers that we can allow on the bus, whether they be masked or some other approach. Do you have any update, or can you, sorry to jump on Councillor Reardon's comment on transit, but can you make a few comments, City Manager?
I can, Your Worship, and I can address both comments that the councillor made. First of all, on the first slide that you referred to, everything on that slide, council voted in as an essential service. So when transit's on that slide, it was decreed by this council that it would be an essential service. The reason it was broken down the way it was is the reality is, in the purest sense of the word, transit is desirable. But because of the nature of our community and the importance of transit to this community, this council decreed that it was an essential service. That's why you see it broken down that way. But certainly we are working under the assumption, not the assumption, under the fact that this council has declared transit an essential service at this point in time. On your second point, transit and parking are operational, but they are absolutely with limitations. And the biggest limitation on transit right now is that in order to ensure necessary social distancing or physical distancing, we are allowing no more than 9 passengers on any given bus. That must change. We are not getting the revenue we should from our bus system, and our bus system is getting more and more demand on a daily basis as more and more services and businesses open up in the city. Therefore, we have put in a formal request to the province to have that restriction of physical distancing lifted for our transit system, and instead take the same approach that airlines are taking, whereby, since they can't assure physical distancing, people wear masks on airplanes now. And in fact, my understanding is that the Halifax Transit Authority has just taken the same approach. That request has gone into the province. We have received a quasi-favorable reply in that they have now responded back, show us your operating plan, and then we'll let you know. So that's what we're in the process of doing now. And we should have a favorable answer. I'm hoping for a favorable answer within the next few days, at which point we can take the proverbial handcuffs off of the transit system and allow more people onto our buses.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reardon. Deputy Mayor?
Oh, thank you, Worship. I just need clarification on 2 or 3 issues. On the annual planting program, is that going to be suspended throughout the city so that all the flower beds uptown or other places will not be happening?
That's correct, except for those that we have a contractual, long-term contractual obligation to continue to purchase the flowers. Otherwise, the vast majority of our flower beds will simply be maintained so that they do not overgrow with weeds, etc. We simply cannot afford the flower program. It's not only the purchase of the flowers, It's also then the labor to maintain those flower beds there afterwards.
Okay, and there will be, either you'll put mulch on them or you'll weed them every once in a while so they don't look overgrown.
Yeah, we will maintain them so that they don't look disgusting. Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. And I know, I just need clarification on this. I know a number of other council members have talked about this, but I haven't got it clear in my mind. When we talk about organized sports, and I mean, there's many ball teams in this city, and there's many people that coach them, whether it be parents or other members of our community. When you say, well, they can go and use the ball field, or I think that's what you're saying, but does that mean that if I had a ball team, I would either have to come in and get permission from the city to organize that team, or somebody somewhere else is going to have charge of all the teams, because they're all separated. They're not like organized all together, from my understanding. So how does that happen? Like can they use the fields at their own discretion, or can they go and do the lining like that staff always did, or how? I mean, we've got all kinds of emails in this day, and I know people are watching council to see what's going to happen on this. So I just wanted to be more clear so we know, like, if there's 20 different ball teams, which I have no idea really, but if there is, can they all use the ball fields? Do they pick their own times, or how do we organize that? Or are you going to select one person from the community?
The sports fields, and when I refer to sports fields, you could include in there ball diamonds, soccer pitches predominantly. The sports fields will be maintained by the city to an acceptable level whereby we don't destroy the assets in subsequent years. So we're not going to let infields of ball diamonds be completely weeded over. And we're not going to let the grass grow to 8 inches whereby the grass starts to die or whatever. So we will maintain them to a minimum level for the maintenance and the protection of the asset. We will not, based on our recommendations this evening, we will not maintain those sports fields to playable standards, line drawn, sands raked, pitching mounds properly established, etc. We simply cannot afford to do that. I would remind council and the public that right now, well over 80% of the costs of doing that are borne by the taxpayer. Those using the fields only pay less than 20% of the actual cost of using those fields. So we simply cannot afford to do that. We are talking about well over $100,000, probably getting closer to $200,000 in order to do that. Now, in exchange for that, we obviously won't charge any fees either. What we were referring to previously with Councillor Merrithew is if there is an organization out there that wishes to explore the possibility of using one of these fields for their own purposes, for their league or whatever, we would be happy to enter into discussions with them to see what that might look like, to see if we can satisfy health and safety, to see if we can satisfy all sorts of other considerations. And then during those discussions, if we think there's potential, then of course we would have to have, as part of those discussions, how the scheduling would work, who would be responsible for that scheduling, etc. And now to Councillor, I believe, Mackenzie's point, perhaps the staff would have some capacity to help in some of those regards. But again, we are not hiring casual workers this summer. We can't afford them. And therefore, our capacity to do this sort of stuff is very much limited. For tonight, what we are saying, what we are recommending is we can't do it, but we're certainly willing to enter into discussions with anybody who would wish to take this on as a community effort. But there still would need to be a lot of work done to figure out whether it was viable and whether it was safe and practical to do so.
So just in saying that, that might mean that maybe more than one organization could take the job on, like could 3 or 4 organizations work together if they
They can work together, or 3 or 4 organizations could put in bids for 3 or 4 different fields. Whatever, we're open to any ideas that the community may wish to put forward.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And one last question on our playgrounds. Where there's playground equipment, a lot of the smaller ones that we still have, we've have them taped off. And I don't have a problem with that. I understand that. But I also noticed that, and I didn't go over the whole city to see it, but that some of the playgrounds in the city that are maintained and kept by the school system, by the Department of Education, they're not taped off. And I wondered why, you know, I guess, you know, it happens right in the area where I live. One's closed off, one's not closed off, and I couldn't, and they're the same kind of equipment. So I just wondered if there's any reason why some are closed off and some aren't. I know they don't belong to us. The ones that are open, they belong to the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Your worship, through you to the deputy mayor, you're right, they don't belong to us, and we have enough to worry about for ourselves. I will say this, though, on playgrounds, and perhaps it extends to some parks as well. There is still very much a possibility that we will get summer students paid for by the federal government. We are waiting confirmation of that. If we start to get summer students, we may have an ability to open more playgrounds, more parks, etc., than we are currently doing. Right now, the ones that are opened are, again, the ones we can afford to open based on our staff limitations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you, John, for the explanation, because I was a little in the dark on this. I kind of got distracted when Councillor Merrithew had asked his questions at the start. Are you going to be doing a really detailed press release to explain this? Because, I mean, I can tell you, when I read the package over the weekend, I found the presentation was very vague, and it left me kind of confused. And then I got overloaded with emails about, you know, from baseball associations, and you know, I answered back to them, and I said, you know, I really want you to watch the council meeting tonight because you need to get the information. And I said, I'm a little in the dark on it as well. And so the staff presentation should hopefully answer a lot of the questions. So I just want to ask, you know, and I really want to say, really send this out to the public so that they understand what exactly is not reopening, and, you know, to maintenance but not operational, and, you know, and that sort of thing. Because right now I'm like, you got the provincial government coming to, hey, it's in phase yellow and you can do low contact sports, you know, and beaches and swim parks are open, right? And then our message is going to be, well, we're not opening up some sports fields, because that's the only ones that I received any feedback on, because of, you know, safety, but also because of money. And I'm like, well, it should be really about money, because it has nothing to do with safety. Because if it's about safety, then they should be fenced off and you can't even go in on your own, right? And, you know, like I see splash pads are going to stay open, or are going to reopen, if I understand the presentation correctly. There's no social distancing with a bunch of kids at a splash pad, right? So I think we really need to strictly say the city is facing up to a $5 million deficit. I believe that's the number, because of COVID-19, maybe because of lost building permit revenues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We cannot afford to open these up this year. It's my feedback on it. I guess it's not really a question.
Yeah, through you, your worship, to the councillor, short answer is absolutely. As soon as council makes its decisions this evening based on our recommendations, there will be an extensive public service announcement kind of approach to make people understand what is and is not open and why. I think you bring up a great point that I would just like to emphasize to the public. Everything that the province is announcing that can now reopen, it can now reopen, not that it must reopen. And when you read the fine print, it goes on to clearly state, if you are going to reopen, then you have to have an operating plan in place that makes it safe. And that follows all of the WorkSafe and Department of Health guidelines. So for example, your example that you mentioned of splash pads, as of more or less now, we are authorized, we can open them, but we are still working on the operating plan. And if we can't come up with an operating plan whereby it is safe, then we will be coming back to council with a recommendation that they not open. What you're seeing tonight, it is our recommendation that we try to open them in the summertime. But we still have some very real health guidelines that we need to satisfy, and specifically on swimming pools, splash pads, and beaches. The Tri-Cities, Fredericton, Moncton, and ourselves are having our rec teams get together and try to figure this out, because it is going to be very difficult to follow the Chief Medical Officer of Health guidelines at a splash pad.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the city manager. Some of my, I guess going near the end, most of my questions or concerns have probably already been discussed, but city manager, I believe that you've heard, at least for me as a layperson and as a member of the public and councillor, I'm most concerned with what's going to be communicated after this meeting adjourns as it relates to leagues and teams communicating to their roster of players and families whether or not city sports fields and ball fields are open or they're not, or do we send out tryout schedules or not, based on the fact that, look, do they have capacity or not? There's a lot of gray matter, and I understand that, especially in the phase that we're in, that there's some questions around capacity, but you know, I think it needs to be really clear that yes, sports fields are accessible, and it's going to be the responsibility of those respective user groups to provide adequate maintenance and upkeep to those fields in order to be given permission to use them. How that's communicated, I'm not sure, but I do know it needs to be communicated that, hey, it's time to get bats swinging, and it's time to get the arms warmed up and get out there and start throwing some balls around again. Certainly very supportive of that. Happy to hear that there's collaboration among the Tri-Cities and perhaps the outlying areas, but I know there's a lot of teams, a lot of families, and a lot of communities that are waiting to get out there, and whatever we can do to access monies to help support that, whether it's seasonal employees or not, and wherever we can provide some assistance, I think that's great as well. But I mean, recreation has to be a priority in this community. I mean, it does. It has to be right up there. Has to be a rank number 1, 2, 3, right in the top of the roster to provide adequate recreation. Not only adequate, but top shelf recreation opportunities, and at the very least provide sports fields that are there as a result of taxpayer dollars to allow those folks to get on those fields and play. How we do that, I'm not sure, but I do believe that we need something more than just gray. It needs to be very black and white. This is how you do it, and we're going to, as a city, we're going to make sure that those fields are open and available for you to use. Is a priority out of this conversation this evening. Thank you.
Okay.
Your Worship, if I may, just a point on finances. I just want to re-stress, for the benefit of our public. Right now, we are estimating $5 million in lost revenues and $5 million in costs. And those costs, by the way, there's virtually nothing that is discretionary. It's things like transit, pothole repair, etc. So right now, we believe we can balance the books for 2020. Quite frankly, we will continue to closely monitor the financial situation. And if it ends up being a little bit better than we currently foresee it, then absolutely we will be coming back to council suggesting what else we can do as a city because we can now afford to do so. Regrettably, however, it may go in the other direction as well. So we are keeping a very close eye on the financial situation. We must balance the books by the end of the year. And if you take a look at the services we are currently providing, there's not really anything on that particular list that costs money that is discretionary in nature. So we are caught here. That's why we are willing to work with community groups within safety, within labor agreements, within all of that, to try to get as much of this done as humanly possible. Staff effort doesn't cost anything, but hiring staff, buying fertilizer, using fuel, etc., very much does. Thank you.
You follow up, Councillor Norton?
Yeah, I do, Your Worship. City Manager, I think that last point is the big concern for me. I never question the capacity of St. Johners to get behind an initiative. You know, you only need to look at any particular event. I think of the deputy's event that she organizes on an annual basis as it relates to hospice and selling out tables. I don't question the capacity of our city to get behind this. They just need clear direction as it relates to that. Look, if fertilizer needs to be donated, where do we send the fertilizer? If a community group decides, look, we typically in the run of a year donate free volunteer hours to partners assisting local schools through the PALS program. Schools are closed. How can we redirect those precious and valuable volunteer hours to get out and mow and perhaps provide some volunteer hours to maintain a local field in the backyard of our business? That's where we need some clarity. For me, I believe that the community is ready to play ball. As a city, it's time for us to open up the fields to play ball. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey, you had a follow-up?
Thank you, Worship, and pretty specific to what Councillor Norton just brought up. But I'm wondering if, City Manager, is there a way to better formalize that? Because I would like to see some form of outreach from us, from the city to the community, requesting partnerships, whether that be in supporting maintenance on baseball fields, or signing up to take a planter in the uptown and plant flowers in it. Is there a process by which we could do that? Is that a realistic possibility within our scope, I guess?
Well, what has been proven successful in the past is for community interest groups to step up and say, we'll take responsibility for A, B, or C. So again, after this meeting this evening, we will make sure that the public, to the best of our ability through social media, our website, etc., is aware of what we are not planning to do as a city, and the areas where if they wish to volunteer and step up, then they could. It would be very, very difficult for us to find the staff capacity to go out and solicit donations. That's, I think, something that's more appropriate to these interest groups and to the community at large to go out and solicit those donations. But the notion of adopt a highway or clean a kilometer of road, those are tried and proven methods by which a community can contribute to its community. And we're suggesting that because we can't afford it this year and only for this year, this is not precedent setting. This is not the way of the future. If there are interest groups that wish to step up, then we could enter into detailed discussions with them as to how to enable that.
No, thank you. And my intention there wasn't to put on staff to do that outreach, but rather just what you said, whether or not that community involvement could extend beyond, I guess, the ball fields.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Deputy
Mayor?
Well, I just had a short follow-up on the ball field issue. Because it's our youth and, summer is here, and I understand our financial issues. So, I mean, I get it all, but I also get that we have to do as much as we can to support the youth in our community, because I've been told, and I certainly haven't checked into it, but people tell me that play ball that are involved in this organization, that the other communities are opening the ball fields. And, you know, I don't know that for a fact, but that means the competition between our city youth and others. I mean, this is going to be a great, terrible issue for the youth of our community. And they really need to be able to get out there. And what I'm concerned about tonight's meeting is that I don't expect staff to do anything except they got to be there. Somebody from staff has got to be identified so that if somebody wants to get involved in doing a ball field, taking it over or whatever, they have a particular person to call. They just can't call the helpline or the open line of the city hall because we are too big of an operation. So, I mean, if the city manager, if you want the calls to come directly to your office, fine. If not, maybe Tim O'Reilly. You know, I want to vote for everything here tonight, but I also want to leave this meeting knowing that we did our best with our circumstances, that we'll do the best we can for all the people out there that want their young people to play ball and get involved, and that we've given them some direction. So if there was some way that we had some person or department that they could get in touch with, because that's going to be the first question they're going to ask us when we walk out of this meeting is who am I to get in touch with, you know?
That will all be included in the public service announcements that we make on this issue as to who they can reach out to. But it's different, of course, if you want to adopt a ball field compared to you want to adopt a flower bed. But we will lay all that out, who they can contact if they're interested, and we will make sure that we connect the dots on those issues. I would be remiss to not remind council that when we talk about activities for our youth, community recovery, if you will, which you will be briefed on in just a little while at this session, ball fields are only one aspect of the services we should be considering for our youth. And therefore, the community recovery team will be looking at all of this. And we do have a growth reserve put aside that can be used for some community recovery work as well. So, and that will again be discussed this evening to a degree. And it is another consideration as we move forward. What I do know as your city manager is right now, based on our budgetary projections, we can't afford it, but it doesn't mean we should not, and we will work with groups to see if there's another way of getting this done.
And can you, if you could please, can you get it to us too? Like, because, you know, like when you're going to send this out, you know, because we're already gone through the growth initiative, so we know something about that, or some of us on that committee do. And, you know, that has to come back and go through council. And I guess, I don't know when people start playing ball, but I think it's pretty soon. So I really would appreciate us doing whatever we can to make this work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reardon.
This is just a quick comment, but we just took another $1 million out of your staff, and now we're saying we want to make staff make all these things happen. So this is the yin and the yang of budgeting. You're not going to get what you want if you're going to cut your staff. Anyways, that's the end of my comments.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to swing at that baseball or not, Councillor Reardon. So, look, city manager, my comments, these have been very difficult times. We have a lot of people happen to be talking about youth. I could talk about seniors. We could talk about, you know, lots of folks that are challenged in our city right now. But I guess specific, we certainly had, all of us, a lot of feedback in the last day or so around this issue of youth, around mental health, about teams and all the benefits of youth sport. I don't think there's a single person on council that isn't supportive of that. But I think the lesson for me in this one is how we communicate, how proactively we can communicate. And I'm just sharing, it's not a criticism, it's an observation. Certainly, I think I received more notes in the last 48 hours on this issue than I have on some $10 million items. So it means, as some of the others said, recreation's awfully important. Certainly, Mr. O'Reilly would know all of the organizations that represent many of these teams. So I suspect he can get in touch pretty quickly. But I guess here's my summary, city manager. I think what we're saying is, and this is what I communicated to everyone that messaged me, we have a $10 million structural deficit that we're dealing with, and it means tough decisions, and we have to address it. And council's already made those decisions. Frankly, you and your team are now going to implement that. On top of that, we have COVID-19 that's causing another $5 million plus worth of stress. As it relates specifically for these comments around youth and field sport, I think what I've heard is there will be no fees charged. That was confusing to people, city manager. They did not realize that. There will be no fees charged. The fields will be available. We need a partnership on maintaining those fields, and that no one is saying youth won't be able to play sport. So it sounds like for 2020, let's all put our hands in, let's work together, let's find a way to maintain these fields, and youth are going to get to play sport. So I think the sooner we can communicate that out to the organizations, the better, to come up with that plan to allow organizations to perhaps donate, or if the fees are not going to be charged, then there will be money available to buy the fertilizer, to Councillor Norton's point, or maybe hire the lawnmower to come in and mow the field. And lastly, I hope, city manager, that our own collective agreements will not stand in the way of a new model to get kids on the fields this summer. And so full stop on youth sport. I like the rest of your plan. I hope folks will step up and put some flowers in on King Street and do some things to try and help us get through these times. But your point, city manager, is not lost, and other members of council. These are going to be difficult times. We're not going to be able to do everything as we move forward. So full stop on youth playing sport. I hope Mr. O'Reilly can hold a call with folks in the next couple of days so that these conversations can move forward. And then from there will be many conversations on many other issues, like our tax rates and water rates and all the things that's what we're trying to get at here, is changing the way we're doing business as a city, addressing our deficits. We're spending $10 million more than we can afford, and we need to change the way we do business. And ultimately, I'll end with this: continue to challenge ourselves as a staff and as a council on how we deliver value to taxpayers. So I'll end my rant. Sorry, city manager, but thank you for the presentation tonight. And I think the more proactively we can communicate with groups that are going to be impacted in the city, I think the better. And I want to thank everyone that reached out to me over the last couple of days with all their feedback. So, okay, did anyone move the recommendations? I don't believe anyone's moved the recommendation.
I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Merrithew. Thank you. Did you have a comment, city manager, before we moved on?
Two very quick ones, your worship. First of all, three actually. I agree with everything you said, but the interest groups will have to step up. Otherwise, the options become very slim. Secondly, I do need the public to understand that we are not encouraging self-initiative on this one. We do not want someone going out and planting flowers in flower beds without having consulted the city, because someone then needs to maintain those flower beds, etc. So this has to be done in concert with the city and not as self-initiatives. And the third one, just in defense of the comments and the criticism that the staff has received over the last few days, this is municipal governance in transparency. On the Friday, we pitch what we're going to pitch to council, and then it gets further explained at council. There was no secret meetings on this. There was no preamble to council, because that's not how municipal government operates. So now that we have, or if we have the direction from council, then absolutely we will do the full public engagement strategy that's required. But we need the decision to move forward on that. And I just mentioned that because there's always this concern of, why didn't you reach out to all the community groups and make all these plans ahead of time?
Yeah.
Because we didn't have support of council. And I know that's not what you're saying, but I know there was criticism like that.
Fair enough, city manager. I think it's just each one of these interactions gives us opportunity to reflect on the next time. That's all. I think your comments are fair as well. Okay, great. On the question, then we have it on the floor. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please show a hand. Okay, and anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. And Ms. Rackley-Roach, thank you for your presentation and everyone else involved in this transformative work that we're undertaking at this time. Thank you. Okay, next item, please, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, 12.3 on the agenda is another staff presentation on Dominion Park revitalization.
And Acting Commissioner Hussey will do the introduction, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Acting Commissioner Hussey, over to you, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. As Deputy Commissioner O'Reilly prepares his presentation, I'd like to take this moment to remind council that the first master plan for Dominion Park was developed in 2014. Since that period of time, there have been several changes, including the opening of Timbertop Ventures and 2 consecutive years of record flooding that destroyed and devastated the facilities on site. Staff has engaged with the Community Association, worked on a plan of improvements, and we are here this evening to recommend a path forward. With that, I would like to hand it off to Tim O'Reilly to his presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. You can hear me okay? Okay, thank you. I want to thank Council, first of all, for your discussion the last half an hour or so on community engagement and partnership, because this presentation is exactly about that topic. I'm joined this evening for this presentation by Derek Chason, who's actually the new chair of the newly formed Dominion Park Community Association. I'm just going to bring up some slides for you. Okay, sorry for the delay there.
So it stopped sharing there, Tim. I think you're working on that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to bring it back up again, Your Worship.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. And again, as I mentioned, I'm joined tonight by Derek Chason, who's the chair of the Dominion Park Community Association. He and I will be sharing this presentation, and will also be available at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. Your Worship and Council, this discussion is about Dominion Park, one of our district parks on the west side of the city. What this presentation tonight is about enabling. Enabling not only a vision for the community for the future of this park, but also making that vision a reality, actually turning it into concrete improvements for the community. It involves enabling and involvement of city staff, city council, the community, and even external stakeholders as well. Just a bit of the history of park master planning within St. John. There's a period of about 4 or 5 years, about 10 years or so ago, where a number of very expensive master plans were developed for different parks around the city. There's some examples up on the screen right now with remaining work to do with those different master plans. The issues with those is they're very large, very expensive. And there was no consideration of operations and maintenance costs to operationalize those improvements. And there's no sense of prioritization as well. So what ended up happening, with a few exceptions, and there were exceptions, including through leadership of this council in the last couple of years, with some of those exceptions, a lot of these master plans have essentially stayed on the shelf and haven't progressed. That hasn't served the community, and it's created a lot of disappointment in the community as well. Just had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with some stakeholders of one of these parks, and these discussions come up about these master plans not being able to progress. Obviously, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of guiding principles that have allowed, including leadership by this council, to turn the corner in terms of the right process for the city. So there's a lot of financial and asset management policies that have been put in place. So to sum it up in a couple of words, it's essentially, we can't spend the money we don't have now, and we shouldn't try to spend money we don't have in the future. That needs to go into every aspect of our different plans, whether it's recreation or otherwise. We need to live that, and we need to integrate that within our plans. Play SJ, that was adopted a few years ago, that talked about the prioritization of our district, regional, and district parks. And again, Dominion Park is one of those. Right sizing our facilities to focus either on fewer assets, but also, as we've looked at in the last year or so, also in terms of decreased spending to sustainable levels and contributing to the sustainability of the city. Also part of Play SJ is the notion of community partnerships, not only in developing visions for different parks, but also work with the community for operations and maintenance of those assets as well. The other thing that's obviously come up in the last couple of months, and really summarized the last couple of council meetings, is the discussions around the sustainable future for St. John. Both short-term, obviously, addressing the $10 million structural deficit next year, but also for a more sustainable future beyond 2021. I bring this point up in this presentation only because, again, like there's going to be impacts in 2021 as a result of our financial situation, we really can't develop long-term plans for a lot of our parks with city involvement until we have a very much clear picture of where our finances are going to be and some of those external stakeholders that require those policies and that sustainability to come into play. So it does come into play with different services, including trying to look forward with a very dedicated community group, such as the Community Association for Dominion Park. Along with the experience of those very large master plans, some of the policies that have adopted, including by this council, I was before council in 2017 to reset policies around master plan development for our different parks and district and regional facilities, including, again, considering the life cycle costs of those assets, not just constructing them, but what's going to take to look after them long term. We got some direction from council at the time about progressing with the master plan for Rainbow Park. And we're all very proud to say that we made a lot of progress in the last couple of years with a couple of great external stakeholders, including Canadian Tire Jumpstart, to help move that master plan along. We also got direction from council in 2017 to revisit future master plans to make them more affordable, again, to enable those completions within a more affordable framework. And again, in 2017, after the implementation of Rainbow Park, the intent was to move on to Rockwood Park. Just a short history on Dominion Park over the last number of years. It can be, considered as some up times and some down times in terms of the last few years. So as Mr. Hussey mentioned, there was that master planning exercise done in 2014, quite a modest compared to some of the other implementation plans, about a $600,000 cost. Since that time, we've had some very good developments in the park. Again, the introduction of Timber Top Adventures. They're located in the blue area that's on the screen right now. We've also had a lot of community interest in the park, a few starts and stops over the last number of years, but certainly over the last number of months, a very concerted and collaborative effort and coordinated effort with the community and the forming of the association. That's been positive. And this council has also put in capital dollars for implementation of improvements in Dominion Park the last couple of years. Those are the good points in the last number of years. We've had some downfalls and some issues as well. So again, we had 2 successive years of flooding that essentially wrote off the main facility within Dominion Park, which is a combination of a change, washroom, and canteen facility. And then in 2020, thank goodness not also, but instead of the flooding, we also have the current pandemic, which has impacted a lot of city services, including how we can support this park and this plan going forward. City staff, just like common council and the community, have done their part to enable this plan going forward. I know Councillor Norton mentioned Greg Cutler's name earlier in the evening. He's been a lot of part of it from staff's perspective, and a couple others as well. Move this along. We've helped the community association become formed. A lot of governance help forming into an actual association that's registered. Assisting in different meetings that have occurred the last number of months. We're in the process of assisting in development of an RFP to engage a consultant to complete this updated master plan. We've also suggested a phased approach to implementing the master plan to make it more doable and affordable to actually make it concrete with real deliverables in the next number of years. Those steps are up on the screen. And we'll also be looking to council to defer some of the capital and insurance money that we've identified for this park as well. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Derek Chasaw, again, who's the chair of the Dominion Park Community Association, to provide a brief update on what the association, the community is looking in terms of a vision for that park. Derek?
Thank you, Tim. Your worship, members of council and city staff, you guys can hear me?
Yeah, perfect, Derek. Thank you.
Excellent. So yes, your worship, members of council and city staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on this agenda item. The Dominion Park Community Association was formed to build a partnership between the community and the city of St. John. We are made up of a group of community and business leaders who want to see the park revitalized and maintained going forward. Our mission is to enhance Dominion Park through community engagement while focusing on generational sustainability, creating a place that inspires outdoor enthusiasts, explorers, and recreationalists. One phrase in particular I want to focus on is generational sustainability. Tonight, we're asking for permission to leverage funding previously earmarked for Dominion Park, along with insurance funds that were recovered as a result of the damage from the 2019 flood that led to the decommissioning of the canteen. We would like to utilize the existing capital to pursue funding from multiple levels of government, private business, and grassroots initiatives. We see this as a favorable directive for the city that aligns with the ongoing sustainability plan, PlaySJ, as well as the current fiscal climate. We are asking the council to grant us the opportunity to stretch the impact of this capital as far as possible, as well as establish ongoing relationships that will continue to support the park into the future. The Dominion Park Community Association has already begun making progress. We've hosted, community workshops for local residents, middle schools, and the Multicultural Association, collecting valuable feedback on park development privy to COVID. We've begun building relationships with potential project stakeholders in public and private sectors without impeding on existing city objectives or circumventing the approval we are seeking tonight. Also, we just completed the annual park cleanup this past weekend, which I want to extend a thanks to everyone who participated and sponsored the event. Dominion Park Beach is a community treasure that could be so much more. The community and city partnership model in other regions has shown us that this can work to benefit everyone involved. My only ask outside of the report is that if our association shows progress in accomplishing milestones in terms of the phased approach of this project, but haven't fully utilized the funding earmarked currently for 2021, that we have an opportunity to extend the remaining balance into 2022 via another council update. And that's all I have. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Dominion Park Community Association.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Derek. Back to you, Mr.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, so just to wrap up, so we talked about the community involvement, we talked about city staff's involvement, how Common Council can assist in enabling this plan to become reality, or 4 recommendations as part of our staff report. They're up on the screen right now. The first one up on the screen is actually you're in quotations because it's actually a suggested rewording of that first staff recommendation as opposed to what's in the council report. The other 3 are just summations of the other 3 recommendations in the staff report. So essentially, we're looking to council to set aside the capital funds and insurance funds that we received as a result of the flooding to 2021. We're also asking for advanced approval from council to allow staff to apply with the community group for different funding opportunities. We do have to do that as on behalf of the property owner at times for some of these funding applications. And the fourth one is just to reaffirm those 2017 resolutions in terms of affordable plans, plans that consider life cycle costs. But we do have the one exception of increasing the priority of Dominion Park because, again, a combination of the flooding and the opportunities or issues that presented, but also, again, the strong community support for the park that have started in the last number of months. And with that, we'll open it up for any questions for council before we consider these staff recommendations.
Okay, I see you, Councillor Armstrong. I'll come to you in a moment. Could you stop screen sharing just for a moment, please, Tim? Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
All right. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks, Tim, and especially Derek Chason. Thank you. You had a couple meetings we all attended, and I'll tell you the West Side one at the Milford Community Center was a powerful one. You had more politicians in there than you could shake a stick at. So you were well represented for the Dominion Park community there. I just have a couple questions. It says up to $150,000 from the insurance fund, Tim.
Councillor Armstrong, you were cutting in and out a bit. Can you just stay close to your.
I don't know, talking too loud.
There you go. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
On the $150,000, Tim, it says up to put it to the side. Does that mean you're going to use it for some other things, or can we stick to the whole $150,000?
Sure. So the reason why it's up to is, again, I've had discussions with the community association about this, is we still want to do something temporary in 2020 at Dominion Park. So as your previous presentation just indicated, we do have some indication and some plans to open beaches within the community. We'd like to use some of that funding from the insurance money to place temporary facilities at Dominion Park. So as council recalls, or as I mentioned in my presentation, the permanent facility, the permanent building with the change room and washrooms had to be torn down. There's some funds that insurance money we may use in 2020 to replace that with temporary facilities. But that will be
No, I was down there. I mean, I believe Local 18 tore down did they tear down the center?
Yes, we use internal staff to do that. Absolutely.
But yeah, no, that was a good use of sources and saved us some money. Okay, I just wanted to get that clarification because as a West Side Council, we're all in this, and this will be the first time in 40 years something is being done there drastically. I shouldn't say drastically, it's not the right word. It's good to see the community's fully involved. Derek's in charge there, and he's doing a great job with the community. And working with you, Tim, I'm sure we're going to move things. We just, as a council, I voiced it at the Milford Center. I don't want us to move too fast. I think Derek has the right idea in his committee. Get all the money they need to do the job right. Even if it takes a year or more than a year, put the best facility in place. I think that's the best idea for everybody and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So you're moving the recommendation, Councillor Armstrong?
Move recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Norton. Okay, thank you. And Councillor Sullivan, I had you next, and then I sit next to you, Deputy. Yep. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. No questions. Thank you to Derek, you and your team of volunteers who are working over there. We just finished a long conversation about how important community involvement is in St. John. And with the slide that we had that showed all the park plans and incomplete park plans, I guess something this park has that I don't think the other parks have is that community who is taking ownership of the park. It's been successful in Tucker Park. It's been successful in priority neighborhoods. And the folks at Dominion Park, that is so key. So I think working with the community group, you have ownership. It leverages funds that we're giving. It's a plan that's there. So I would just encourage other groups to look at these models because they are successful. So thanks. Those are my points.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Well, I just wanted to make a point, Your Worship, on the recommendations. I think Derek said it what you want to be able to change that spend in 2021 and reword it and say if you have money left over for 2021 that you allow it to be, that the city allows you to hold it over until 2022. Is that right? I think Tim, you said that, but also
I think this requires some give and take, of course. So as long as we're showing progress, like for instance, Tim was mentioning a phased approach. So if we have a few projects that are successful and we're moving forward, but we simply just run out of time, or private partners run out of the financial means to support additional projects there, yes, we would like to ask for to access those funds in 2022.
we should just have the recommendation reworded or amended to say that the funds can still be spent in 2022 if they're not used in 2021.
Mr. O'Reilly, do you?
Yeah, if it could, Your Worship and Council. So again, this will be an iterative process over the next year or so. My suggestion to Council for this evening is to keep the recommendation as is. We will work towards it. If at some point in the next number of months we realize that we can't spend all the money, then absolutely we can come back jointly with the committee to look for some of the money to be carried forward into 2022. The big caution, again, I know we have very passionate communities that want to develop parks and develop, very, monumental parks that is going to be good for the community. Just want to be absolutely careful that we don't work towards plans that we just can't afford and just can't do. So there's been lots of cases. All those plans that are up on the screen in my earlier slide, they've all been community behind them. And each one of those cases have involved the community, involved developing those plans. And again, it's just that balancing point of, yes, we want something the community can be proud of. But we also don't want to create a situation where we're putting money further and further into the future and trying to build something that might just not happen. So that's my suggestion to Council. Keep it the way it is. If we do need to come back to Council at a future date, we can do that.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Reardon, please.
Thank you, Worship. Derek, welcome tonight, and thanks for being part of the community group and on the lead with this. It's a great initiative, and I'm really happy to see it. I have a couple of questions for Tim O'Reilly, though. Tim, I'm wondering where we are, how this all fits in with our Play SJ document and where we are on Play SJ, because I guess I have some of the same concerns you have with, not with this project per se, but with community groups going with projects that maybe we can't afford at the end of the day. So that's one of my questions. And then on the recommendations, I just need you to explain how the queue will now form up with Rockwood Park, Dominion Park, and Rainbow Park there. That's all part of it. And then I was also wondering, Tim, in regards to Dominion Park, I know that it is a district park. I don't know if every ward has a district park. I know my ward does have a district park, which is Rainbow Park. And so I'm wondering how that works with other wards, because I know like the Peter Murray is also part of a recreational complex that would include your ball field. And I don't know if all of those are equal amongst the 4 wards. So I'm just curious about some of that little background as to parks.
So yeah, certainly. So what Play SJ does is it does identify a series of district and regional parks. There's only one regional park, which is Rockwood, but a series of district parks that are throughout the community. Every ward has district parks. Some of them, yes, are ball field complexes. Some of them are pure parks. Some of them are playgrounds. And what Play SJ does is identifies those assets that are throughout our community as being the ones that we as staff recommend, and we'll put those recommendations forward to Council to invest in those select number of parks around the city. It goes along with right sizing. So again, we do have too many facilities within the community. We need to continue the process. We've closed a number of playgrounds. So we're looking to close one of our arenas, which we got approval 2 weeks ago from Council. So we're proceeding with that plan. That goes hand in hand. And those two things are going to allow us to invest in those district parks and regional park more effectively into the future. Along with that, again, it came a couple of years afterwards, but some of those financial plans are now in place as well, and financial policies to make sure that we can afford the assets that we build in these communities and these parks. So all those different policies kind of go hand in hand in terms of actually implementing smart projects that we can afford to build and afford to look after into the future. I hope that answered most. Was there a piece I missed out, or does that?
No, that's fine. I just was going to ask about the queue. I mean, I'm very much in support of decommissioning things so that we can put our limited resources into the spaces that would most impact the biggest groups of people. And I know that Dominion Park is a district park, and I know that that's where our efforts should be going. So I just want to make sure that we are on track with Play SJ of still looking after the decommissioning component as well as we, move into expanding and putting our efforts into the other parts. I'm just curious about the queue now, what that will mean for those, for Rockwood, I guess, because I think that.
Sure. Yeah. So the 2017 adoption recommendations of council again put Rainbow Park first, and again, council should be very proud again with its community partners that we're pretty much there with Rainbow Park. Between the Canadian Tire Jumpstart investment in the playground, the growth reserve money that we're just finishing investing in lighting and security at that playground, we're in pretty good shape at Rainbow Park. So the council should be very proud of that. The next step after that was to, again, take some of these master plans, revisit them to make them more affordable, but the focus next is Rockwood Park. And if council adopts recommendations this evening, the plan for Dominion Park would be done concurrently. And again, that opportunity of the insurance money, council's investment of capital funds, but again, that strong community association that's in place is the reason for that. What we do after that, let's do Rockwood, let's do Dominion Park, and then I'm sure we'll be back to council in the future to reprioritize the rest of the district parks because there's a lot of work to do still.
Sounds great, Tim. Thanks so much, both you and Derek, for bringing it forward. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Merrithew.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I really believe in these community partners. I really believe in consolidating, having these district parks, but this is a strange agenda we have tonight where we've gone through a number of cuts. We just talked about ball fields and so on and so forth. So the question I have either to city manager or Tim is that how does this fit during these times of restraint, okay? We just said we don't have enough money to open the ball fields. We want community partners to do it, so on and so forth. But yet, we're 135 grand out of capital funds and another $150,000 of insurance. That could be spent anywhere if we had to. So I need an answer on that, not only for myself, but for everyone else watching this. Thank you.
Your Worship, through you to the councillor, and fully recognize that he's also the chair of the Finance Committee, so has an intimate knowledge of our financial situation and the challenges we face. What we are very much trying to do as staff on behalf of council is balance the needs of our operating fund and our longer term capital fund. COVID, as painful as it is, and COVID, although we will feel the impacts for some years, I would suggest, is a transitory thing. Capital is really where we assure our long-term quality infrastructure for the city. And I know the councillor is fully aware of this. So what we're trying to do as staff is balance one with the other. I think it would be dangerous of us to ignore our capital requirements because of short-term operating deficits, and the vice versa is also true as well, to spend too much on capital at the detriment of our short-term operating. So yes, we are doing the dance between the two of them. Dominion Park has been neglected to a degree, so have a lot of our other parks, but Dominion Park has the very real challenge of having been decimated by floods over the last few years. And we have yet to address that in any way. The money has just been sitting there in a bank account waiting for us to move forward. With the revitalization of the community group, It would sit in that bank account for a little bit longer, but we do believe it is a sound capital investment moving forward. Councilor Merrithew, my apologies, I can't really give a better answer than that. We are just balancing the various priorities, and we believe that this is a sound recommendation on the use of some capital money for the future of one of our district parks.
Thank you, City Manager. I think especially in this agenda we're seeing tonight, the question had to be answered, and thank you for answering.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the councillor's question as it relates to the finances and obviously the city manager's explanation there. I guess congratulations, Derek and Tim. Thank you for partnering from the staff level of the city. It's one of the things I always think about Dominion Park is it's been a bit of an aggravation. Obviously, the success that Derek has had leading this on behalf and with the community has been some recent success, but it's been one of the things that has been we've cut our teeth on this one in the sense that I don't always feel as though we've rewarded the Dominion Park area for their community efforts to get that park to where it needs to be, whereas other parks in comparison lack that community organization, yet still continually saw repeated investments, growth, and enhancements in their park. And I think the city manager's words that it's been somewhat neglected resonates with me, and I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy to see that Dominion Park is getting the treatment, the recognition, the investment that it deserves. We build on the backs of those before us on so many levels, and whether it's folks like David Ryan, who was outspoken on this, or the folks that show up at those Dominion Park beach cleanups, or investments such as Timber Top. There's been a number of moving pieces and people that have, for many, many years, tried to highlight and red circle Dominion Park as a district park that is well in need of investment and much needed attention. And I'm happy to see that now in tandem with the city. So hats off. This is a good news story, something to be celebrated. And it serves more than just that Randolph Island West Side community. It's a place where newcomers, folks from outside the city, folks within the city, come, adventure, and spend a day. So it's a good enhancement to our recreation base and something we need to continue to stay focused on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you. My hat's off to the Dominion Park Community Association. I know how important citizens are to getting and moving projects along. I certainly work with community associations a lot over here on the east side, along with Councillor Merrithew. Him and I are together with our local community associations all the time. So my hat's off to those members of that Dominion Park Committee. I just want to, when I was reading this and I was looking through it, and much to what Councillor Merrithew brought up about, we're going to take some new capital to invest in this project, and I'm all for these types of projects. I totally believe in them. Not taking away anything as far as the merits of the project, and that it's long overdue. Absolutely, it's long overdue. But of course, we're in a very environment fiscally where things are, as I would say, we're down to counting paper clips as an example. So anyway, when I look at a project like this, I think, well, I think this is good for growth, right? I mean, this makes our city attractive. Maybe people would want to buy a new home as close as they could to this brand new park. It's good for, stimulation. And I wonder, rather than looking at adding it to our capital costs, is there any way we could look at just taking the money out of the capital, out of the growth reserve funding as a way to go towards this, as opposed to putting it on, the city's credit card per se? it's, something I'd like to, a member of the growth committee. I know there's some money there. I'm just wondering if, the city manager might have a comment on that.
If he doesn't, I do.
Yeah, your worship, to the councillor. The facts and figures behind the growth reserve and very ballpark figures is approximately $650,000 that is non-committed at this point in time. Previous council resolution has voted that 80% of that would go towards recovery efforts. That includes both business and community recovery. So about $500,000. I think there will be something like $150,000 left in the growth reserve after that. With those sorts of numbers, if we start to dip into the growth reserve for capital projects, we will bleed out the growth reserve well before we satisfy the demand of any recovery efforts over the next couple months to couple years. And also by decision of council, for the next 2 years, the growth reserve will not be replenished because of our $10 million shortfall. So overall, it most certainly is an option. But when I take a look at all the stuff that will most likely wish to tap into the growth reserve in the next few months to year, I don't think that we should expend a large portion of it on this particular project. The capital money has been set aside for quite some time for Dominion Park, well before COVID-19 hit us, and the same holds true for the insurance money. And much like we protect money for lands for public purposes and other pots of money, this money was set aside for this, and I do believe it would be appropriate to use it for this and hang on to the growth reserve for other key recovery initiatives that are just around the corner. Would be my view.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Okay, just a couple of comments for me. First of all, I would agree with all the comments to you, Derek. Thank you to you and all of the, when I went to the first meeting, I think your kickoff meeting, it was one of the few meetings I'd gone to where you were hearing people talk about, people that were in their 50s, 60s talking about being on a beach when they were 5 and 6 years old or 7 years old. Like there's an awful lot of deep-rooted connection. I know you yourself, you have a lot of deep-rooted connection to Dominion Park and to the beach and to the whole area. So thank you for that. Thank you, Tim, to you and your team. For me, I guess, I think it is a tremendous asset. I think it needs investment. I think, like you said, Councillor Strobridge, I think and others, it'll help us grow. I think I shared the same comments the night of your first meeting, Derek, about a phased approach. Not just spending money to spend it. I think we have to be careful. And I know no one suggested that tonight, but we just have to be careful there. Managing expectations, I think, is critically important. Not designing up a $5 million park, but being realistic. But in the same breath, Councillor Merrithew, you asked an excellent question. And I think, for me, we've heard a lot in the last couple of days from folks on things they're passionate about. And the theme for me was from some folks saying, I don't get enough value for the money I pay you. And I think for me, we can't be afraid to say, we're restructuring and we're making incredibly difficult decisions, but we're going to spend our $166 million differently. And not be afraid to defend that. We're going to spend it in parks. We're going to spend it in arts and culture, and we're going to just invest it differently. And I just think it was an excellent question you asked, but for me, that's how I reflect. So, as we go forward, we have to better understand how we can position St. John to grow and thrive. And I would argue the way we've been spending our money isn't doing it. With respect, an extra $100 million in wages in the last 15 years hasn't done it for us. So I hope in the next 15 years, we'll spend our money differently and we'll better understand what folks value. So thanks very much for the great discussion tonight. Thanks again to you, Derek, and to all of the community volunteers. So, okay, with that, I'll call the recommendation is on the table. So I'll call the question, please. All those in favor, please show me a hand. And anyone contrary-minded? Okay, not seeing, I don't believe, or hearing anybody. That is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Okay, next item, Common Clerk.
Your worship, item 13.1 on your agenda is a recommendation from the Finance Committee with respect to budget monitoring policy.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to turn that over to the chair of our Finance Committee first, please. Councillor Merrithew.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll introduce this very quickly, but I'll speak to something else afterwards if you allow me a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Sure.
So, budget monitoring policy. This is the 9th policy that Finance Department is brought to Finance Committee, and in turn, we're bringing it to Council. Each one of these policies are best practices policies and support our long-term financial plan. Commissioner Fudge is with us tonight for any questions. But before we do that, and I don't want a lot of discussion, if any discussion on this, Mayor Darling, is that almost a point of order. I'm a lot embarrassed. Under this piece in our agenda, you'll see primary author has my name under it. This is not the first time I've seen this, sir, and I should have said something earlier. I am somewhat embarrassed and talked to Commissioner Fudge about it today. Certainly, I'm always talking to people in the Finance Department. They keep us in the loop, but I am not the primary author here. And I don't want to diminish or take any credit away from what wonderful work staff has done. So I just want to put that out there. I don't believe it deserves any conversation, but I talked to the commissioner today, and I think this is the last time we'll see something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very honorable. Thank you, sir. Okay, and are we, Councillor Merrithew, are we having a presentation tonight, or is this just going to be open for discussion?
I believe it's just open for discussion, and again, the commissioners with us tonight.
Your Worship, could I ask Commissioner Fudge just to, for the benefit of the public more than anyone else, because he's prepared to do it, just highlight one or two key points about how important this policy is before we do open it up to that discussion?
Yeah, I thought we were going to have the presentation. I was excited. I've been waiting all night for this. But Commissioner Fudge, over to you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'll go through this fairly quickly. We did have a lengthy presentation at the Finance Committee. So first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity. The annual budget, as you all are aware of, is obviously one of the most important tools a planning tool any organization can approve, whether it's private sector, public sector. You know, it's our spending plan. It helps us measure our performance, and it also sheds light on our spending habits, and it helps us find ways to save money, look for opportunities, and also prevent financial loss. And we're seeing that with our analysis for COVID-19. And as the chair mentioned, this is the 9th financial policy. Policies are important to me and our department from the perspective of they're the backbone of our long-term financial plan that you've approved, that we put so much work into. Policies outlive the creators, and they promote continued fiscal responsibility. So we're encouraged that council has been very receiving of the policies we brought forward. It's a best practice. It's foundational for us as public servants to express our stewardship in managing the budget and illustrate that we're being responsible with our financial management. So just very quickly, we are seeing the benefits of these policies with the reduction, for example, on our debt. You saw an article in the newspaper this weekend about our success with reducing the debt by almost 14% since 2015. That's as a direct result of policies, debt management plans, and the long-term financial plan. So these really all add up to make a big difference over time. This particular policy, the budget monitoring policy, will increase accountability and cost control for our organization from the perspective that it will ensure that wages and benefits, the wage and benefit budget and the goods and services budget are managed separately as separate budget envelopes. So each manager, their budget performance will be evaluated separately on how they manage those budgets rather than blending them into one to demonstrate their results. The overarching principle being wages and benefits were never intended to subsidize goods and services and vice versa. So departments will not be authorized to offset wage and benefit and goods and services surplus or deficits unless there's a business plan to do so and it's approved by the city manager and myself. Departments will also not have the authority to fund new or unplanned spends that were not budgeted for during the year without scrutiny and review. And by doing this, this will in turn increase the accuracy of our future annual budgeting process preparation. And we will quickly be able to identify the one-time or non-recurring spends that are in our budgets, which of course will reduce the risk of our future structural deficits. So we will analyze surpluses and deficit positions a lot more closely based on those categories separately every year, determine if permanent budget adjustments are merited. And that's how we end up reducing our budgets, reducing our costs, and reducing our tax rates over time. There was a question earlier in the evening about, can we get into looking at opportunities within our wages and benefits more closely? Well, as we wean out these one-time items and we start making permanent adjustments to our budgets, we will see those opportunities. So as is our objective with all of our city best practice financial policies, our objective is to improve the city's financial flexibility. And to do that, we need to be creative with our scarce resources, our challenging tax-based environment. And so this also provides a mechanism as we draw efficiencies and savings through this process. It allows us another means to fund our reserves, make more investments in growth, with respect to some of the decisions you're making tonight, reduce our infrastructure deficits, and accelerate our debt reduction even more to meet our long-term financial plan. So high-level summary, and with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong, your first up.
Thank you, Worship. It's just a comment. I mean, this is our 5th year, going into our 5th year, our first meeting. But I just want to say, I'm probably proudest of this finance committee. I'm on the growth committee, but the things they brought to council, and we've approved every one of them, are absolutely essential to running this city. And as I said each and every time, it's hard to believe we didn't have these in place before. But if anything should be advertised to the general public of anything that this council has accomplished, these 9 policies should be foremost in the public's mind. This is what makes an efficient city run. Unfortunately, it took 170 years to get some of them implemented, all of them actually. But I'll tell you, these are absolutely essential. And I can't say enough good things about the Finance Committee and the Commissioner of Finance getting these done and to council, because these are what make the difference, not right away, but in years to come. And this will be, I think, this council, one of their greatest achievements to get done, these 9 policies, because they will last a lifetime. And Councillor Merrithew and everybody on that committee deserve full marks, Mayor, you included, obviously, to getting these done. And hope this last one will be passed, I'm sure, but it sets the record for the next generation on how to do business in the city of St. John. So I'm on the growth committee, but like I said, these are so essential. It's unbelievable they haven't been done for 170 years. So congratulations. Thank you for listening.
Well said, Councillor. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, folks are tired. I want to pile on just for a second. Then I want to thank actually Barbara Simpson for her article on the weekend, lowest debt in a decade. It started with the last council. We've stayed focused. Echo everything that Councillor Armstrong just said, because I think the focus and the actions don't sometimes match the narrative that gets portrayed. And I too am very proud, Councillor Armstrong, of the work when you look back at the focus that this council has put on through its priorities on growth, on getting our financial house in order with the policies, the long-term financial plan, which should be the guiding document for the next decade plus, and then the amount of energy we've put into the provincial transformational reforms. Councillor Merrithew is a humble guy. He wanted to make sure that he didn't want any more conversation. He wanted to make sure his name was taken off that document, but he has led with passion this committee, the work, and absolutely to our commissioner, all of our commissioners, all of our staff. We've gone through some difficult and very challenging times, but we have highly dedicated, passionate, talented staff who have led us through some very difficult circumstances. And, you know, when I reflect back on the last 4 years, I could never have imagined any single one of those categories, but growth, the fiscal challenges that we've had, you know, fires, floods, COVID, you know, just when you think nothing else can come around the corner at us, it does. But we're resilient. This community is resilient. The staff is resilient, and I'm really optimistic for our future. So I'm excited. I know when a finance committee meeting happens, the viewership of our YouTube channels spike up. The bandwidth is a problem, and everyone's tuning in just to see Councillor Merrithew. So all kidding aside, thank you for the tremendous work. I'm excited by these policies. They are a lasting legacy, so everyone should be very proud of these. So. Okay, Councillor Reardon, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just add briefly also my thanks to Commissioner Fudge and the Finance Committee. You know, it's when you have a great team, they're only as great, I guess, as they are enabled. And so we've had a council that hasn't been afraid to let them do their work and to change the way we do business. Change is tricky for everyone. No one likes it, but we've had a council that's enabled them. And so I think that's so important. And for the public, there are 5 council members on the Finance Committee. The other 5 are on growth. So there's 1 from each of the 4 wards and 1 at large on each team, and the mayor's on both of those teams. So it's we really have embraced change, and we really want to move forward. So I thank staff for all the work, because I guess with our encouragement and everything, you know, we both end up getting rewarded at the end of the day. So I think our future does look a lot brighter. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation, I can't remember.
I'll move the recommendation.
I thought Councillor Merrithew just beat you to it. He wanted to move it. Okay, and you can second it. Thank you, Deputy. Thank you. And great. So great conversation. Thank you. And on the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Perfect. And anyone contrary minded? Sorry, that I don't know what made me think that was funny if somebody would vote against it, but that would be your right. That's a unanimous vote of council. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Next item, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, item 13.2 is a growth committee report with respect to municipal economic and community recovery planning.
Okay, perfect. So council, I'll turn this over to the chair of the growth committee. I'm going to just give you a couple of introductory remarks. So the growth committee endorsed a series of staff recommendations on May 21st, which we are now presenting to Common Council for your consideration. While council faces considerable financial and sustainability related challenges, we cannot lose sight of the importance of enabling a prosperous and competitive economy, developing a new path forward where we thrive economically, socially, and culturally. The committee heard from staff, and your agenda packet includes additional details on this, of the economic impact of COVID-19 in St. John, including which industries are particularly impacted in areas within our city, with a concentration of those businesses most impacted by the public health pandemic. The committee also heard of all the great work already underway within the City of St. John to support a broader community and economic recovery from COVID-19. Whether that is directional signs in Rockwood Park, to St. John Water's How to Safely Reopen Building Guide, to rental deferral program for tenants of the city-owned buildings, to the one-stop development shop now delivering permit and inspections virtually and by appointment. We also received a presentation on the city's municipal economic and community recovery planning, as well as parameters around the potential distribution of approximately $550,000 from the growth reserve earmarked for recovery efforts, and the related resolutions were all adopted by the growth committee. Before I hand it off to the Deputy Commissioner of Growth and Planning to offer some additional commentary, I did want to take this opportunity to thank St. John for their resiliency, innovation, and leadership through this public pandemic. While the city is showing leadership in recovery, there is tremendous innovation occurring in our businesses, nonprofits, arts and culture communities, citizens, organizers, developers, economic development agencies, the Chamber, Uptown St. John, in order to support our broader economic growth. For that, I would like to thank all St. Johners for their commitment and resilience through these difficult times. So it's my pleasure now to turn it over to our Deputy Commissioner of Growth and Community Development, Mr. Phil Willett. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship, to members of council. Can you hear me and can you see my screen? Perfect. So the presentation that I have today is an abridged version of the longer presentation that you have in your packet. So hopefully I can get through this quickly and I can answer any questions after we are done. So first off, this is municipal and economic community recovery. And I wanted just to mention what I mean by community and economy. This was an intentional effort. We understand that growth has more of a traditional economic link to it, but there's also a community recovery that's needed. So I think council is well briefed on what that means from an economic standpoint and accelerating business activity and consumer spending. But on a community recovery, we're using a very broad term here. And we're incorporating cultural, arts, recreation, wellness, neighborhoods, parks, and public spaces as part of that broader community recovery. And we think they are intertwined. What we do for the community will inevitably support the economy, and what we do for the economy will inevitably support the community. We have done a lot already to support recovery in our community. However, we are doing a little bit more. And one of the things we've done is assembled a kind of a cross-departmental team within the city to hear what the community is indicating the city could do and could do better or could do faster as it relates to recovery. And we are going to develop our own programming. So this is as a plan, as a strategy to do that. And I won't go through every item on this goals and objectives, but we are going to focus on the infrastructure, programs, and facilities, as well as investments and land that the city owns in order to unlock recovery. And we're going to be thinking about that creatively in order to deliver to those most impacted in our community. We inevitably will be working with the many partners already involved in recovery across our community who are doing tremendous work to support those in need. We will be doing this over time. I think a lot of folks think that recovery is today. What are you doing today? And that's absolutely important, and we'll strive for that. However, it's also 3 months down the line. What does our community look like in 3 months? Should we wait for 3 months to start thinking about that, or should we start planning now for when that social distancing protocols diminish or the expectation of a looser approach to social distancing? And then also, what's our new reality? After we've defeated COVID-19, what does our communities look like? We need to prepare for that as well. So, I say that because I think everybody might want to just spend all our focus on just delivering an immense amount of value today. And we will do that. We will do a lot. But we also need to think that this needs to be phased over time. Lastly, the city needs to be prepared for stimulus funding. We need to be ready for when the federal and provincial governments say we need to reboot and re-accelerate our economy, and inevitably governments, provincially and federally, choose to do that by strategic infrastructure funding. And that is going to come, and we need to be ready for when that comes to unlock those projects that are on our docket for development. In the local consideration standpoint, I just want to make a couple points. One is, as mentioned earlier, we we are involved in this, but we can't do this alone. We can't just come up with these ideas and then implement. We need the community support to do it. We need their input. We also understand that this is an effort that everybody will be supporting within the city, not just Growth and Community Development Services or the Growth Committee. One inevitable thing we are looking to do is to drive volume and customers to those impacted organizations in the geographic areas where there's concentration of those businesses that are the hardest hit by COVID-19. We will also be supporting innovation in the delivery of our programming. And we are not going to come with you. Some of you might be disappointed by this, but some of you might be very excited about this. We're not going to come to you with a strategy of 100 items or 25 items. What we're going to do is shoot for at least one initiative every month that we can just introduce, implement, and execute. And we will continue to do that. If we can do more than that, that's great. I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver than the opposite. So we did announce last week in Growth Committee a couple of the immediate initiatives that we wanted to do. One is the night market with the city market, which we're very excited for, which we are projecting to occur sometime in mid-June. So more information on that is coming. We also mentioned that there's this great pivoting of those recipients of 2020 grants from the city. So we give grants to a variety of organizations, to the Community Arts Grant and the Community Grants. And earlier on during the pandemic in March and April, we'd sought out these groups and said, what are you doing? What's your plans with these? And a lot felt like they needed to defer. They didn't know what to do, or they were in a waiting game. And today, it's overwhelming the amount of innovation that these groups are doing in order to again, support this community and economic recovery. So I mentioned a couple last time, and I did want to just mention one, which I think is very important to our community, is one example of this is the Community Arts Grant gave $3,000 to Third Space Gallery. And they usually have this kind of large-scale event in the Uptown, brings a variety of people and exhibitions of contemporary art. And obviously, through the pandemic, they thought it might be done for them this year, but they've come up with a re-envisioned approach on how to present contemporary art within the community, within these new guidelines. And they sought artists' proposals for this and this new way of doing it, and they received an overwhelming response. And they are proceeding. And there's approximately 14 projects that will be exhibited through the city over a week-long duration, with half the artists being from St. John. The exhibits will be in the public and will be exhibited for a longer period of time than usual to support some of the challenges with bringing in too much density at a time. Some exhibits may go on permanently as well as a form of public art to the city. Lastly, in terms of immediate initiatives, is street closure. So I think there's been a lot of discussion in this in Canada, across North America, and in New Brunswick here, certainly as well. We are reviewing this actively with our partners within the city, and we have already done quite a bit of work on what types of options might be available. While I would love to come to you today and say this is an early and quick win, it is not. It's a little bit more work to be done on this, and we are both optimistic that we can identify something, but also cautious in terms of making sure that if we do this, we do it right. So we will be coming back to council eventually with recommendations on street closure as we progress through these next steps. So now we're on to the growth reserve, which is another part of the presentation that Growth Committee received. And again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but the objective of this earmarked funding, which is $446,267, which is the 80% of the remaining uncommitted funds from the growth reserve. I can go through that a little bit more for those that are interested, is to stimulate and accelerate our economic and community recovery. We've established objectives as well as criteria in order for these funds to be guided. So I'll run through the criteria soon, but before the objectives, evidently it will align with the economic and community recovery efforts. It will receive approval from Growth Committee and Common Council at a policy level. We will also be supporting programming in commercial and cultural districts of the city. We also want to mention that this is an opportunity to leverage funding. So we don't know for sure if that's a possibility, but we will seek that. If we can make $2 for every dollar invested, we will do that. And we will seek those partnerships if available. The other aspect that I wanted to cover in terms of objectives that's important is that we'll focus on areas of municipal authority. And I think this is really important when we solicit ideas or when we receive feedback. Some are quick to offer advice on things that the municipality doesn't have authority or does not regularly get involved in. We do not regularly get involved in giving direct grants to businesses. That is more federal and provincial funding. They have an immense amount of taxing revenue to be able to do that. Municipalities, unfortunately, do not. So that is not one of the areas of municipal authority that we would typically take in order to do this. And $550,000 will not go too far if we take that approach. So we will be focused on, again, those services, programming, assets, facilities, and investments that we have as a municipality to accelerate recovery. These are the 8 criteria that will be used to guide decisions as it relates to this. We have not developed a program, so we're not releasing, call the city with your idea and get your check from the city. That is not what we are doing. What we're doing here is simply telling council that staff are going to be working on a variety of programs. We're going to come back to council and growth committee and say, here's what we think is the right thing to do. This is why we think it's the right thing to do. And we have fed it through these criteria that you have pre-approved. And when we come to you, we will come to you with those programs. Some of them might be a distributed grant program. It could be an investment in street closures. It could be an investment in a variety of things. We already have, since Growth Committee, we've already expanded the list of ideas from 30 to 40. So we continue to grow in terms of the initiative. So we will use this, we will guide this as staff, and you as members of council should also expect us to be upholding these criteria. So I won't be going through this list with you, but I suspect you have read it. I did want to mention that in the longer slide, I did include what this program is not, and I think it is important to highlight that. It might frustrate some, but it is not an opportunity to offset municipal administrative fees that we typically take in. There'd be some exceptions to that that could be reviewed under these criteria. However, it's not intended for that. It is also not intended to offset service impacts that we have reduced as a result to COVID-19 or sustainability related efforts. It is not intended to duplicate pre-existing initiatives from the federal and provincial governments. And it is not expected to support normal operations of the city or of agencies. With that, the resolutions from Growth Committee to Council for its consideration are to receive and file the presentation, to direct the city manager to proceed with the implementation of the immediate initiatives, and direct the city manager to return to Growth Committee in June with direction on street closures, and to adopt the Growth Reserve Fund objectives and criteria for economic recovery investments. With that, I'll take any questions from the council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ouellette. We'll stop screen sharing. Thank you. Councillor McKenzie, I think I saw you.
Thank you, Worship.
Yep, go ahead. I see you, Councillor.
Phil, appreciate the presentation. I'm really concerned about urgency, with this pandemic and trying to recover, whether it be, for local businesses, construction projects, whatever. Now, if you're going to look at options for street closures and come back in June, when do you anticipate in June coming back? Like a date? Trying to figure out when we'll have a decision implementation going forward. Is it going to be July? Is it going to be August? because businesses need to know.
Yeah, through you, Councilor McKenzie, to council. We intend to go to Growth Committee on June 30th. That's the next scheduled Growth Committee meeting with our recommendations, and we would go to the next soonest council meeting to ratify any sort of decision. However, you should know that depending on the form of street closure, we can, some folks are typical of closing down the street for an event, and that can be done more quickly. However, it should be noted that some street closures can take quite a bit of time, a month, up to a month ratification through council, and that is outlined through a bylaw that has been adopted by council in terms of street closure. So we will try to do this as quickly as possible, but the immediate next step is to gather that input that we need in order to quantify, so that we come back to this council and we have definitive direction on what type of street closure might work best or will work best for those criteria outlined.
Okay, well, we didn't have the results of that Uptown St. John survey until after the Growth Committee meeting. But when I looked at those results, everybody in the Uptown area is for free parking. So that's obviously going to be number one. And when you talk about street closures, there was no context around, are we talking Friday 6 p.m. to Sunday 6 p.m.? Because if I've got a 9 to 5 business Monday to Friday, I'm not voting. I would support that. But there was no context, and it created a lot of controversy. And it took what should have been a fairly straightforward concept that's done in a lot of other places and put it into, well, now we've got to study it, we got to consult, and we're going to lose at least a month, maybe 6 weeks to 2 months in a period of time where every single business day is going to determine the viability of the business going forward. Are they going to make it? So I'm really not in favor of waiting till June 30th to make a decision to bring to council sometime in July or August, and then have businesses going out saying, well, what else could we do? It's just not urgent enough for me.
Okay, well, thank you, Councillor. We'll continue the dialogue. Is that the?
Well, I think that we can. I think that we can act quicker than what we are, and I don't think some people are realizing that businesses are on the line here, waiting for decisions. And so if we can do it in 2 weeks rather than 2 months, that's what we should be doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. City Manager, go ahead. Yep.
Your Worship, through you to the councillor, I agree. We should do whatever we're going to do as quickly as possible when it comes to street closures. Our next step is the community engagement. We're doing all this for the benefit of the community, and in particular, the benefit of the businesses. So we want to do what they feel is of benefit to them. So we will engage, we will undertake that additional community engagement. And I agree with what Councilor McKenzie has said, that it was a simple yes or no question or a simple prioritization in the Uptown SJ survey without a whole lot of context. And that's now our job, is to put that context out there, show the various options, and get additional feedback from all the businesses, not just the restaurants, not just the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but everybody, and come back to council. As soon as we can get that engagement completed, my commitment to council is we will be back as soon as humanly possible. Obviously, street closures only make sense really during nice weather, and we all recognize that the window of nice weather in Atlantic Canada is limited. So we will come back as quickly as possible, but we do feel that we do need to do that consultation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Phil and staff. And I think you deserve equivalent congratulations as was given to folks in finance. I'm pretty proud to be a part of the committee and be able to work together on this one. In the spirit of working together, I certainly appreciate the need for community consultation in this. We need to rely on our community partners. We need to rely on their assurance that they understand what's happening at the grassroots of our community. And I hope that we can use them as partners to be able to continually continuing to reach out to them and involve them as much as possible and rely on their expertise on this stuff. You know, with Uptown St. John, you know, we've seen the signs of we're all in this together, and really I hope that that's what we take forward in terms of consultation. Certainly in the form of urgency, I think if we can get our consultation completed soon enough and get it back to council, would it be possible to circumvent growth on that part, or is that not really within the timeline?
Your worship, through you to the council, we often circumvent the committees for urgent issues. So this is an example where that may be appropriate or required, but we always do that in consultation with the chairs of the committees.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, no, I would hope that would be the case again here. And you know, as I said, I hope we continue to rely on our community partners. Sorry, Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make maybe one addition to this. One thing that we're noticing with street closures is that, and I think it is important for council to know this. I am not aware of a out of the park 100% of everybody will enjoy a street closure option. So what we will inevitably come is this is the amount of folks that might not be happy about a street closure. And we will try to mitigate it as much as possible, but it is not an overwhelming win. It does impact a lot of different people, a street closure. And while there are different interests at play, and there's passionate people on both sides about, you know, more parking, more street closures, it's going to be something that council will have to negotiate. And from a staff perspective, the best thing we can do is come back with the best data to equip council with the best decision and prepare the community for that. And it will take some resiliency of council to know that you will receive some opposition of any decision that is made related to any street closure.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Thanks, Phil. If you ever find a decision that has 100% support of it, let me know, because I've never ever seen one before.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councilor Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you, Worship. Just wanted to mention a couple things that we talked about at the Growth Committee on this. It's this is actually the first time the city's ever had a sort of a pot of money. Well, we don't really have that kind of money, but it's in the Growth Committee, and we want to bring businesses back and get them open and get them up and going, even though we're not giving money directly to the business directly, but we're trying to have activities also. I want to mention that because one thing this money somebody might have an idea that would create something of interest that could be done in the community that would involve all citizens to come out and sort of get them active in the committee or in the community. So, I mean, this money is for various things. It's to help business get back on track, but it's also to help citizens to, get off of the virus and, into the community and sort of give them more life in the community and to undertake some activity and events. So I think that if anybody in the community has an idea of something, they should be able to forward it to either one of the members of council or our staff, because it has to go through. We have to make sure that it's the right thing to do for everybody. But the other issue is that this money isn't just for the Uptown, it's for the whole community. So there might be something that somebody wants to, have to take place in one of the other parts of the city and not just the Uptown. So I just want to make sure people understand that this money is just not for the Uptown area. The other thing is, I don't think we discussed this at Grove, but if there's some issue that we've had to cut back because of the issue of our funding, can we take some money from this growth reserve and add to another whatever it might be, either a service or an act of something that we're doing, or is this just going to be for new ventures?
It's not for operating. City Manager?
Yeah, the criteria we've put together for the growth reserve, or the possible use of the growth reserve, makes it quite clear that, first of all, it's not designed for things that are normally a recurring cost. It's not designed to offset city's normal operating budget. It's not necessarily for new things, but it must be for things that are specifically related to community or business recovery. So for example, we've removed this evening, based on vote of council, the asphalt overlay program. We've suspended it for the year. There can be no consideration of using this money to just offset that decision. But could it be used for other things that help the community? Absolutely. It's not just new ideas, it's things we may have done in the past that we are no longer doing in the city.
So are we open to citizens giving us ideas or no?
Well, we certainly are open. The deputy commissioner's point is we're not going to put together a full-up consultation stakeholder plan where we go out to and solicit all of that feedback, but we are always open to feedback from community members, either directly to the growth organization or through their counselors to the staff. So it's not as if we won't listen, but we're not going to go out and actively pursue ideas. We simply don't have the capability to do that level of stakeholder engagement on this.
And I guess the other thing that we did mention at the growth committee is that this is not, it's not necessary that we spend the entire amount right this year, because if this money isn't spent in 2020, it will be put into a reserve for the growth committee so that we can use it within the next 2 years when we won't have any funding allocated to growth. So I guess that's something to keep in mind, that we don't have to spend it all this year, because we have another 2 years coming where the growth committee won't have additional money to spend.
That's correct. It will remain in the growth reserve. It has now been earmarked for recovery, so we can no longer tap into that money for other things other than recovery initiatives. It is committed funds at this point in time, but there's no need for it to be spent in 2020. It can go to 2021 and ideally 2022 if it takes us that far.
I just think that the public should know as much of the detail as possible on what the money is going to be spent for or how it's going to be managed.
Every decision will come back to council, Deputy. Okay, thank you, Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to say thank you to the Growth Committee for all the work that they've put into this. And I also want to thank the city manager for his explanation of how this whole thing will roll out. These are very, very, of course, uncertain times for businesses. And there's a lot of anxiety, I guess, and fear about what the future is going to bring. So I think, in all fairness to Uptown St. John, there was a bit of panic because there's so much curbside happening right now. So to use a term like street closure is difficult, because you say, how are people going to get to my business to do pickup, et cetera, and all this other thing. So I don't personally like the negative connotation of street closure. I'd like us to talk about maybe pedestrianizing streets or something a little more positive that gives me more of a positive picture of what's going to be happening on the streets. And I also want to reassure the Uptown area that, because that's the area that we'd be looking at closing, I'm not going to say closing streets, pedestrianizing the streets, is that that anything that's done will be done absolutely with the best interest of that area in mind as we go forward. Only want to have positive impacts on what's happening now. We want to foster what's happening. We want to make sure it goes back to where it was and goes beyond. So just to reassure the public and businesses that this whole scenario is for their support and for us as a team to get behind them and do what we can. So thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to reiterate what John said. This is not rocket science. I know the businesses, and I guess I'm talking majorly Uptown, or whatever, pedestrian walkways, whatever Donna wants to call them. I don't like the connotation of street closures. But anyway, it's a day business and a night business. Remember that Uptown when you do the survey staff. Day and night. You're going to get 100 different things. But there's a day business where there's no sense shutting streets down in the day. really. And Monday to Friday. Maybe from 6 o'clock in the weekends, you can look at it. Just my suggestion, but please don't drag this out forever. We got a 2-month window here. Actually, we probably got 3 months now because September is almost a better month than June can be. So as long as we get back to council within reasonable time, and we have to take the hit on the data we receive, and then we can make the decisions. But let's just have the accurate information. Let's not drag this out because businesses are looking for direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I've got, so first of all, does somebody want to move the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded by Councillor Hickey, moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. Just a couple of comments. First of all, thank you, Phil and Jacqueline and Amy and all the folks that are supporting the growth committee and focus. And thank you, Council, for embedding this in our priorities from day one. I think that Phil, for me, I'm not sure where'd you go. Lost you. Anyway, I thought you were there. Oh, you've turned your camera off. I think just from what I'm hearing, Phil, and what I'm seeing is I'm seeing an awful lot of urgency and a lot of ideas. Some of us who are getting tagged on daily ideas and on Twitter. I've seen everything from restaurants and transit buses to mobile grocery stores and neighborhoods, and they're very creative ideas. But for me, I think what I've just heard is urgency, get as much agreement as possible on the ideas, and act. I think that's what we've just heard. So a lot of ideas flying around, as I've said. I really like the objectives and the criteria that you've come up with, Phil and Jacqueline, Ms. Hamilton, and City Manager. I think it's critical, and I'd like to, on the deputy's point, I'd like to formalize a process. I'm not really interested in having 100 emails on, can you give us money for this? So we have to somehow formalize that process. The objectives that you've laid down, Mr. Roulette, they're smart, strategic. What we should be doing is making smart, strategic investments that deliver a return on investment. And this is not, and no one suggested this on council tonight, this is not about spending all the money. We have a reserve. Reserves are for a rainy day. This reserve is to invest in growth. We need to recover here economically, culturally. So you've put a process in place, and let's make smart investments. If you say no 10 times in a row, if it doesn't meet the criteria, I'm going to support that 100%, Phil. So others have talked about this being community wide, and I just say let's act with urgency. Let's try to get some agreement, and let's get on with some projects here. And I know you've got 3 in the hopper already. So thanks for the good work. Okay, City Manager.
Your Worship, members of council, forgive me, but there's one point that I think bears highlighting. We have been asked by several why we are not providing direct financial assistance to businesses or to members of our community. And the short answer is that of all the tax dollars collected in Canada, only 10 cents on every dollar comes to the municipal level. The remainder of all tax dollars collected in Canada, whether that be property tax, excise tax, HST, payroll taxes, income tax, go to the provincial and federal levels. It is their responsibility in our system of government to do that direct funding as they deem appropriate to businesses and individuals, not the municipal level. We simply cannot afford it, and we are not provided the funds to do that sort of thing. So that's why the approach you've heard this evening is focused more on the indirect assistance that we can provide with that limited pot of money that we have. Thank you, Your Worship.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, the recommendation's on the floor. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Thank you. Not seeing anyone. Okay, thanks. Next item, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, the next few items were tabled at the last meeting of council, so there would be a request to lift from the table items 15.1 through 15.12, as well as item 15.17.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor's moved it. Councillor Hickey has seconded that. First call the tabling question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any or hearing any. Thank you. Okay, Common Clerk. So a number of these items have been really addressed back during that meeting. So I guess we'll go through them. Do we have an option to deal with them in bulk, or do we deal with them one at a time?
It may be easiest, Your Worship, if I just read through them quickly with the staff recommendations. So the first one is 15.1, and that was Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters request to present. This would be a moot point now. They wanted to present on the sustainability items, and the recommendation is to receive and file.
I'll move that recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On the question. Okay, sorry, all those in favor, sorry. Yeah, great. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
15.2, Port St. John letter with respect to heavy vehicle permit fees, and recommendation is to receive for information.
Thank you. Thank you. Moved by the Deputy, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
15.3, letter from A. Rouse with respect to sustainability plan for the city of St. John. Recommendation received for information.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Sorry. Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
15.4, a letter from P. Grudy with respect to St. John Energy. Recommendation is to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
15.5 is a letter from R. Goodwin with respect to citizen petition regarding St. John Energy. Recommendation is to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Casey. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan, you're making me nervous because it's 9:22. I know I've only got, yeah, perfect. Next item, please.
15.6, Your Worship, C. Osborne letter with respect to proposed cuts. Again, recommendation received for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by the Deputy. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor, please say or show a hand. Thank you. Aye. Anyone contrary minded? Great. Not seeing any. Next item.
15.7 is a letter from H. Duncan with respect to sale of St. John Energy. Recommendation is to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Motion's carried. Next item.
15.8 is a letter from S. Nadeau with respect to appointment of provincial librarian with a recommendation from staff to receive for information.
Thank you. Thank you. Moved by the Deputy, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
15.9 is a letter from J. Pierce with respect to feedback on restructuring plan. Recommendation is to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hickey, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. The motion is carried. On the question, sorry, all those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next item.
15.10 is a letter from the Chamber with respect to St. John's sustainability report and the recommendation from staff to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by the Deputy. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
Next is a letter with respect to protecting vital municipal services, New Brunswick's 3 Municipal Association letter to Premier. Recommendation is to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by the Councillor Reardon, sorry, seconded by Councillor Strobridge. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
And 15.12, Moosehead Brewery's tax on transportation trucks letter with recommendation from staff to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
1513 is a letter from L. Hersey. It's a complaint with respect to St. John Transit. Recommendation is referred to Transit Commission.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Strobridge. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
15.14 is Atlantic Provinces Trucking Association letter regarding heavy vehicle permit tax with a staff recommendation to receive for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Motion's carried. Thank you. Next item.
1515 is a letter from Vets Taxi regarding recent decision of council on age of vehicles. The recommendation from staff is to refer to city manager for a bylaw update in October of 2020.
I'd like to speak on that, Your Worship.
Okay, so you want to speak on it? Do we have a, sorry, Councillor Reardon, were you moving the recommendation or? Okay, thank you. We have a mover. We have a seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Councillor Armstrong, over to you.
Okay, I wanted to make a motion, if I could.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor here. We have the recommendation, which is to refer the city to the city manager for a bylaw update in October 2020.
Yeah.
So do you want to, can we debate that? Can you debate that item first,
Yeah,
Councillor?
no, if you want to debate it, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, you're cutting in and out a little bit, Councillor. I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah, it was better when you were back a bit, Councillor. Okay.
Yeah, debate that, and then I want to move a motion now.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to speak on? Oh, sorry, it's a referral. Hold on, I apologize. Yeah, so this is a referral motion to the city manager, folks. So there's no debate. I apologize. Okay, so that's on the floor. So I'll call that question on the referral. All those in favor? Okay, sorry. So on the referral motion, sorry, I missed. So I'll call it again because I missed. All those in favor? So just hold your hands, please. Councillor Hickey, Councillor Norton, Councillor Reardon, Councillor Merrithew, Councillor Sullivan. So is that 1, 2, 3, 4? Is that 5 or 6? Sorry. Clerk.
Could you just have the nays raise their hand?
Okay, thank you. And those opposed to the referral? Thank you. So we have Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Strobridge, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor McAlery, and Councillor Casey.
Okay, so that's a tie, Your Worship.
We did this last week.
Word, folks. Okay, well, I'm going to vote the same way I did last time and vote to refer it. Okay, so that motion is carried for the referral. Okay.
Okay, but can I still make the motion? Because it has to do with the last.
Yep. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Right, thank you. If I get a second, my motion is that as of June 1st, 2020, that the taxi bylaw be permitted to allow all vehicles be 8 years old from year to year from this June. I could have a seconder?
I'll second that.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, the reason I'm doing this is this will help taxis who have taken a real beating as stated in the letter to council. The industry is down by 50% and there's only 4 taxi companies left in this city doing business. This change to 8 years will allow cab owners and businesses to start planning immediately for the future viability of the St. John taxi industry. These people are frontline service people. They get closer to anybody besides the healthcare workers in business, risking and catching the COVID-19. Thankfully, that I heard of, nobody's got it. This is costing the city nothing and is a simple number change for future planning for these companies. I look forward to council support on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, Counselor Reardon. You're muted, Counselor. Sorry, there you go.
Thanks.
I see you, Counselor Merrithew. Yeah.
Can I ask the city manager if he would give us an opinion on that? I don't. I don't know. We went going thinking back. Why did we come up with 7? Is that an industry standard? Is it a best practice? Changing it to 8 just would be till I think I heard because Councillor Armstrong is kind of breaking up until the end of 20. So if I could just get a little bit of that clarification there.
Your worship, through you to the councillor. First of all, the date of 1 June is simply not workable. It is a bylaw change and will require votes of council. So I understand the intent and the spirit behind Councillor Armstrong's motion, but it cannot happen that quickly. That said, in terms of the merits behind the motion, the staff is already supportive of doing what we can to the taxi industry. That's why we proposed to council, and you approved it, that for another year, until next May of 2021, we are going to allow 8-year-old taxis to continue to be in service. The reason we went with the 1-year extension as opposed to the permanent extension is, Councillor Reardon, I cannot answer the questions that you just had and a whole bunch of others. Are there any safety impacts? Is our vehicle inspection program that we do right now sufficiently robust to allow the 8th year? I do recognize that other communities are already at 8. I also do recognize that other communities have stayed at 7. So all we are doing by doing a 1-year extension for now and then coming back to you in October is giving us the time to do the due diligence to come back with the recommendation. We are not against the idea. We just believe we owe you a bit more research before we come to you with our final recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Merrithew.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with the city manager completely. I think it's just really dangerous to rewrite policy on the fly. Give it to them. I don't know whether I'm for or against it. Give it to them. Have them bring it back. Facts and figures help. Let's do it properly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I just wanted to clarify something, Your Worship. We just passed the motion. I didn't vote for it, but we just passed a referral to refer to the city manager to come back by October 2020. So, I mean, we have this motion on the floor now, but if we vote in accordance to what we did before, we're just going to get into another tabling or another tie. Because we just voted in our last motion to refer it to the city manager for October, to come back in October of 2020. I understand where Councillor Armstrong's coming, but unless people are going to change what they just did in the last motion, I'm not sure we can do anything on this motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. The theme all evening has been urgency. We got to protect businesses and make sure that they've lost 50%. And they're dropping like flies. I don't see anything bad about what they're asking for here. I mean, Fredericton just gave Uber 10-year vehicles. I mean, you can have a vehicle 10 years old and drive for Uber in Fredericton. They're asking for a year. It's a change of 7 to 8. I don't understand why it takes from now till October to do that while people keep losing their jobs. I'm totally baffled by it. I support the motion to have that changed. I think it's a stroke of a pen to do it. And then if we want to change it back in the future, we can, or we can, get a recommendation for a longer one. But people's jobs are on the line here. I mean, it's just, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Councillor Merrithew. Thank you, Councillor Hickey.
Your Worship, just for clarification, for additional insight, City Manager, can you clarify on the additional year extension that was, I believe, was given at the last council meeting, or what was done there? Can you just clarify on that?
It permits any vehicle to remain on the road, even if it is 8 years old, until next May. So it gives them another year to operate their vehicles. They do not have to cash in any of those vehicles at this point. They do not need to retire them from service, provided they still pass the safety inspections.
And that's in effect now.
That is correct. It was passed by council at the last meeting.
Right. Yeah. No, I just clarifying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sturbridge.
Thank you. I sat on the old taxi advisory committee. Now, when I got there, the bylaw was pretty much written. There wasn't much left to do, which is why we eventually just dissolved it, because there was nothing left to do anymore. And I remember a lot of discussions, and something that I didn't agree with, even though it was a staff recommendation, because there was staff on that committee, about the age limit that was previously set. And, you know, these cars, you know, I believe they're inspected twice a year. The industry has really been cleaned up since that bylaw has come in. The St. John Police Force is on the taxi cabs all the time. They are making sure that compliance is there. And I think that bylaw has really weeded out a lot of the bad players, I guess. And you know, as you can see, a lot of companies have just folded. They couldn't sustain themselves. And I certainly do understand the city manager's position, wanting to say, listen, well, okay, well, we'll look at it and then we'll go get some information, and that's just process the way we do everything. Is that you know, that's just how we do it. But when I look at this, I see a real sense of urgency, and I'm not afraid that we're going to make a mistake. You know, the taxi bylaw is like anything else. It's a living document. As time goes on, you learn about it, and you go back and you tweak it. And this is feedback direct from the industry, right from them. And this is what they're asking for. And I understand that, as the city manager said, just timelines, it's not going to happen by June, because it just takes that long to go through first, second, third reading type thing. But I really think that this, you know, should go through as soon as it can, not necessarily. And if it doesn't have to wait till October, don't let it wait till October. You know, we need to do something for this industry. And, you know, we talk about, you know, essential workers, frontline workers. Well, these guys are right out in it. And I think, you know, this is a reasonable ask of them. And I'm, you know, okay with Councillor Armstrong's motion, in the sense of, let's get it done as soon as time permits, meaning, you know, to go through, someone's got to write it up, first, second, third reading, and then we move on to the next thing. I really don't see any danger in this whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Merrithew.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just reiterate again, writing policy on the fly like this is, I think it's wrong, and it's certainly dangerous. Secondly, if you want to give these drivers a break, ask the stands to take a little less from their fares every day. And thirdly, and most importantly, if you think lowering the age of the vehicle tomorrow will bring on an increased ridership, you're wrong. That won't increase demand. It has nothing to do with it. You put a brand new one on tomorrow, or a 20-year one on. It doesn't matter. If demand's not there, ridership's not there, it's not there. Look, been referred to the city manager. Let him take care of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. The last time we tried to tell the industry how to be industry, they lost a lot of business. I think what we're missing here is, if I was in the business and I had a 2012 vehicle and I couldn't afford to be in the business anymore because nobody was going anywhere, now I want to get back on the road. Okay, I've got a 2012, and I've only got from now until May before I got to get a 2013. I'm not going to get back in the business because I can't afford a car in May of 2013.
No, can I just make sure, Councillor, I just want to make sure I'm following along properly. Is that you have the rest of the year to use that car in the already approved by council?
If I'm in the business. I'm in the business now, if I'm still on the road right now, but if I dropped out like 50% of them did, okay, now I've got a car, I'm going to enter the business with a 2012. I'm not sure if I can or not, but I've got from now till May, and then I've got to buy a 2013, at least, maybe even a 2014, depending on what council said. It might not even be worth my while to do it because I don't know how much money I'm going to make. Plus, they're going to be putting plexiglass in. They've got to clean the cars between customers. There's all kinds of setbacks for them. Giving them an insight as to what the future is going to be like is not a big deal. I think to be able to say, look, guys, if you want to get back in the business, your 2012 is good, and then 2013, we're going to go with 8 years to get you back on your feet. They've already lost 2 or 3 months worth of business. I think the urgency here is being lost. We're going to lose more cars every month, and people already are saying we're going to cut back on transit. Now we're not going to have any cabs. I think it's wrong. There's a financial component here that's not being caught.
Okay. Yeah, I see a Councillor. Okay, we'll go to you and then I'll ask my question. Thanks, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. This was signed by the only 4 companies left in St. John. It's their only request. These people are in the business, and no business has been hurt more than the tax. And 50% are out. And just as John explained, if you're thinking about getting back in the business, you got about 8 months to make a decision before you have to buy a new car. So this is not a big ask. This is a number from 7 to 8. You could have asked for 10 years. They've asked for 8. So, and the urgency. These people know what they're talking about. It's not just from the owners, folks. This is from the drivers themselves. A lot of drivers have their own car. But remember, it's signed by every taxi company in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. City Manager, you had proposed October. The councillor's motion, I think, said June. You've already made comments that's not achievable. Is there somewhere in between? I'm just wondering if something can be sort of modified here, or
it all comes down to balancing workload, right? The bylaw amendment goes through legal staff, we'll go through transit, we'll go through a number of different steps. I understand the comments, and again, I stress that it's this staff that recommended that we go to 8 as an interim measure because we do understand the sense of urgency behind this. What we are suggesting is to give us some time to take a look at this and provide you all the facts and figures. If October is unpalatable to this council, sure, I'm sure we can advance it to September. We might even be able to get it into August. But there are a number, and that's understating it, a number of different initiatives and files that we have on our plate right now. And I have difficulty jumping this to the top of the heap when I already know that there's an interim measure in place to tide them over. And if we do it in September, they still have 8-9 months before next May to adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor, it's just a question of clarity. You, Councillor Armstrong, your motion was for June. You've heard that feedback. So, do you want to?
How about September 1st? We have something back.
Okay, so you're going to modify to September,
September 1st.
Thank you. And who seconded your motion? I think Councillor Hickey, you did.
Yes. Can I just get a clarification on it, perhaps, Councillor Armstrong? Is the request for a report or is the request for a definitive bylaw?
Definitive bylaw of making it 8 years.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, as your city manager, which means that we have to approach council the first time sometime in August in order to achieve that timeline. And as city manager, I can tell you that that timeline would be manageable.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, and ideally, if it's a definitive answer, the report doesn't take as much staff time because it doesn't exist.
Okay, so Councillor Hickey, you're fine with that modification on that?
I will uphold my second on that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Deputy, are you?
Well, what do we do with the last referral motion then? Can we just go back and change that referral motion? Because now we're making another motion. If it passes, it overrides the referral.
So Common Clerk, just how do we deal with that previous motion if this motion was successful?
Yeah, Your Worship, really, I couldn't hear the motion when the councillor first proposed it. It really wouldn't be a valid motion. You have a valid motion, that resolution of council that was passed. So this wouldn't supersede that. You'd have to reconsider the previous motion if you wanted to change it, which you can do at this meeting, which would be a simple majority vote of council, and add this in. But maybe the simplest solution would just be that this is a request of council. If the group agrees that council's requesting it be done sooner, I'm sure the city manager would do his best to honor that. But the formal way to deal with it would be to reconsider the motion you've already passed.
So then we would just have to say that we would withdraw the last motion.
Reconsider it, yeah. And then we would change the deadline to a sooner deadline, the one proposed by Councillor Armstrong.
But Common Clerk, the request was different in each motion. The request in the previous motion was a referral for a report and further understanding. This is for a definitive bylaw for 8 years.
If I may, the referral motion was to return to council with a bylaw change or bylaw consideration for October this year. The amendment would be, or the reconsideration would be, to return back to council with any potential bylaw changes by the 1st of September of this year, instead of October of this year, which was the previous motion.
But do we first have to take the previous motion off, consider it, and move the date to September 1st?
So Common Clerk, please, so a reconsideration of that earlier motion would be just to change the parameters of the motion and then revote?
That's right, Your Worship.
Okay. So do you want to make that?
We need to make a motion to reconsider the previous motion and make the date September 1st.
Yeah. Okay.
I need that motion.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reardon?
Councillor Reardon has to do it, but it's her motion.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so is everyone clear? So what we're doing is we're going back to the previous motion. I see some head shaking. I'm going to try to paraphrase. We're going back to the previous motion to change the date.
Well, there's two separate votes that you're going to want to do. You need a positive vote to reconsider the motion that's already been passed, and then we'll have a council member propose the same resolution with the new date, which would be September rather than October.
I just the first motion to reconsider the previous motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you. On that question, the question is just to simply reconsider it. I'll call that question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lord, folks, seriously.
Your Worship, there were 6 hands up.
Oh, was there? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the nays raise their hands. So.
Yeah, thank you. And those opposed? Councillor Reardon, Councillor Merrithew, Councillor Sullivan. Okay, so the motion is carried. So we are now reconsidering. Somebody can make a new motion then.
So the new motion would be that we reconsider the taxi bylaw changes to the taxi bylaw to allow the cars to be 8 years old, and that the city manager, that's to be referred to the city manager to come back by September 1st.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, and it's a referral again, so we're not going to have a debate. So I'm going to call the question. Okay, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, thank you. And those opposed? Contrary minded, sorry. Councillor Merrithew, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Reardon. Okay, the motion's carried.
Am I still going to have an opportunity to vote on whether we do that or not with this new motion?
When it comes back.
Whether we go forward or not? for 8 years.
Yes, when it comes back in September.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
1516, Your Worship, is a letter from Rockmora with respect to an armchair gala. Recommendation, refer to clerk to purchase tickets for interested council members.
Your Worship, I'd like to make a different motion due to the situation that we're in and our financial situation, that we decline all donations or purchase of tickets for events for this time until later this year, until we know whether we can or cannot afford it. Right now, we've just got too much on our plate financially.
What is later this year?
Yeah.
Put a date on.
Well, I'd say the end of the year.
It's getting late, guys. December 31st, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I don't know, did
Councillor Casey. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Casey. Second that. Okay, on the question, any discussion? Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item.
1517 is a letter from Minister Carr on the sustainability plan. Recommendation is to receive for information, and a response letter has already been sent.
Thank you. Councillor Reardon moved, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is 17.1 from Committee of the Whole, and this item is a recommendation about a secondment agreement for Develop SJ, and it's to extend the term of Jeffrey Sear to Develop SJ.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. And on the question, okay, all those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Thank you. And these items will be made available to the members of the media after. Common Clerk?
They will, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
17.2 is a recommendation with respect to Fundy Key. It's an option to lease agreement. And the recommendation is that St. John amend its previous agreement, section 2.2 of the option agreement between the city and Fundy Key, to replace on or before May 29, 2020 to on or before August 7, 2020.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hickey. Sorry, moved by Councillor Hickey, seconded by Councillor or Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Okay, on the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
Final item, Your Worship, 17.3. It's with respect to TD station non-disclosure agreement. And the recommendation is that the city enter into a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement with Global Spectrum.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, thank you. All those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. And I know we're done. Everybody wants to go. It's 9:53. But I just want to say thank you again to not only all of you as council colleagues, but all of the staff who prepare week after week or meeting after meeting, hundreds and hundreds of pages of reports. They study, they look at it through every lens. We've dealt with restructuring, with growth, with all kinds of things that we never imagined would happen. We're dealing with provincial reforms and sustaining St. John 3-part plans and financial policies. And I just want to say thank you. They serve you well in the midst of tremendous change. Even in their own worlds on a day-to-day basis, they still serve you as citizens of this community incredibly well, and I'm grateful. So thank you. That was another long night. Thank you for all of the work tonight, and thank you for the decisions. Okay, motion to adjourn. Councillor Hickey, thank you. Seconded by Councillor McKenzie on the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And those opposed, Councillor Sullivan is opposed. Okay, thank you. See you, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.